Hi guys, hi troopers. In this video we're going to be talking about our recent partnership with Altaro. They offer backup and recovery solutions for virtual machines, in particular Hyper-V and VMware. With Altaro VM Backup you can get started quickly, install and run your first virtual machine backup in less than 15 minutes without the need for complex configuration, software dependencies or steep learning curves. Altaro VM Backup is designed to give you the reliability and the performance you need without hassle or complexity, so you can deliver value to your organization and immediately and consistently. It is easy to use with an intuitive UI, making it simpler for you to implement a reliable backup strategy. It's fast, simple to manage, and the configuration backups and the restore and replication tasks across multiple hosts, meaning that you could have it installed on server 2016 and then you could also have it on server 2019, meaning that you can access both backup clients, meaning that you can access the backups from one Windows Server 2019 on the server 2016 host and vice versa from 2016 to 2019. But you'd also be able to remotely backup both clients depending on the OS and the dependencies on there. You can also choose what OSs you want to back up. When you do a recovery, you can then choose the file level restore, so you could choose to recover certain files after that virtual machine or do a full OS recovery in either Hyper-V or VMware ESXi or VMware vSphere or VMware Workstation Pro, for example. On top of that, you've got full control and scalability to monitor and manage all of your Hyper-V and VMware hosts from one single console. Like I was saying then, you can have one console which does one set of server, or you can also connect to remote consoles on the same interface. So you could have like 5 console machines with 5 different server OSs. So say 4 of them are server 2019 and the 5th one is Windows Server 2022. So you can manage all of the VM backups from one centralized location. On top of that, no training is required for your staff. Altaro VM Backup is a very user friendly, and unlike competitive products, it doesn't require you to achieve certification to be able to manage or even to run it. You have full control of your backups, powerful and fast centralized control. Altaro guarantee that they've got your back with their solution. Altaro VM Backup simplifies the management and configuration of your backup and restore job across multiple hosts, freeing up your time. The powerful functionality that's easy to use, set your mind and the minds of users who depend on you, and rest for Altaro's high-performing functionality, including one optimized application. VMs can run and be replicated to a remote site continuously, dramatically improving the recovery time objective, or RTO for short. On top of that, you have continuous data protection, CDP. VMs can be backed up frequently, as every 5 minutes, ensuring that you're in a data loss scenario where data loss scenarios only a few minutes of data are lost, significantly optimizing the recovery point objective, or RPO for short. On top of that, you can have multiple off-site backup locations. For example, you can have one on-site backup location which you can access on a remote server. You can then have it going to, for example, Amazon S3 services, Wasabi, or even your own off-site servers, as long as you point it via the IP address or the network path. On top of that, apart from your local backup, you can store backup copies of your VM backups in multiple off-site locations, such as Microsoft Azure, Amazon S3, Wasabi, or as I stated, or your own off-site servers. For added peace of mind, more information about the 3-2-1 strategy can be found on my website. It'll be linked in the description, or you could also go onto Altaro's website to see that. Native support for various cloud storage options, optionally backing up native to Azure, Amazon S3 or Wasabi. Grandfather to father son archiving, for GFS for short. You can also achieve different backup versions by setting up separate backup cycles. store a new backup version every week, every month, or even every year. RMM integration. Use ConnectWise Automate to plug in to automatically raise alerts and tickets in your ConnectWise Automation control centers. The integration of ConnectWise Control, Automate, or LabTech with Altaro VM Backup Cloud Management Console is no longer being actively developed. You can still configure your backup alerts to integrate with ConnectWise Control Center in its current form. However, no such support is being provided anymore for this plugin, and it was stopped on January 4th, 2019, as well as adding many more features. You can have flexibility without complexity, where you can simply drag and drop selected VMs into your chosen backup schedules and the retention policies, meaning you could have a backup that backs up every day, every hour, and it would only back up the incremental changes that you were setting the policy. It wouldn't back up everything, again, taking up more space. On top of that, it's essentially management of your installations using a groundbreaking cloud-based platform to centrally manage and monitor all of your Altaro VM backup installations from one single online console. The Azure Stack HCI support back up any VM running on Microsoft Azure Stack HCI. It also has 256-bit encryption. All Altaro website backup copies are automatically benefiting from 256-bit AES encryption throughout the secure passphrase. Configuration upon setup. Encryption is optional for local backups. Support for two-factor authentication, or 2FA, in Altaro's cloud management platform, or the CMC for short. Support for REFS partitions. Backup and restore VMs onto Hyper-V host with an REFS partition in addition to NTFS. Physical server backups using Altaro Physical Server Backup to back up any physical machine on your network and restore them to a virtual environment. We're providing it for free. Different purchasing options to meet your needs. Choose whether to purchase a perpetual license or a renewable software maintenance. Please note that if you have a software maintenance, you included support from myself as the partner as well as Altaro. You would also get maintenance, updates, hotfixes, but once your maintenance is stopped, support and updates, hotfixes will cease. If you do have an open case before your warranty expires, say for example you log the case the day before your warranty expires, the support will continue until that case is finished. But whatever works best for you is the goal of ACS and Altaro. It's on top of that, you've got the best deduplication in the industry, augmented inline deduplication. Altaro VM Backup with augmented inline deduplication drastically reduces your storage requirements for your backup repository, saving you time and money. When compared to other vendors, it is the best deduplication in the industry, creating the smallest backup size. Our deduplication runs across all backup jobs, and you do not need to group virtual machines together. No use of post-processing. The least amount of backups space is one of the benefits. Augmented inline deduplication, or AID for short, also improves backup and restore speeds. Much lower storage space requirements when compared to other vendors. Altaro creates the smallest backup size. It is one of the main key points that you can look at to your management team or to higher leadership. On top of faster backup and restore speeds, less data transfer, saving on storage requirements, improve further as you add more VM backups, as well as AID for the augmented inline deduplication doesn't tax its server performance. The best deduplication in the industry, not only due to creating the smallest backup size, but also through the use of our variable block size for greater efficiency. When backing up VMs in just VM data, for example, an 858GB backup with competitor 1 could be 626, competitor 2 could be 592GB, competitor 3 could be 601, but Altaro with augmented inline deduplication would go down to 390 gigabytes. On top of that, our pledge to you is outstanding 24/7 human support from Absolute Cyber Services and Altaro. No matter how great your backup setup is, things can go wrong, so we are committed to helping you and ensuring that your Altaro solutions are up and running right around the clock. We have a team of experts on standby, no chatbots, no gatekeepers, not even answering machines for canned response. Quite simply, our experts are here to help you and waiting to answer your tech support questions on a backup, Hyper-V, or VM 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a guaranteed call response of less than 30 seconds. This is what makes Altaro the best in the industry. The phone lines. We guarantee to pick up the phone in less than 30 seconds. The current average wait time is 22 seconds. Email. We will be guaranteed to reply to you within an hour. Live chat will reply in seconds, and human-to-human interaction will liaise with an actual person rather than receiving a canned response. You can speak direct to product experts, either at the partners that you want to work with or directly at Altaro themselves, but you will need to let Altaro know that you're going through me as the partner, so then I can provide the support, the licensing, the costs, invoicing, webinars, demos, and further information. And you're more than welcome to contact us 24/7, 365 days a year via website, email, or mobile and online. On top of that, Altaro won several awards over recent years, which you can find on altaro.com/VM-backups, where you can see all the awards and the accreditations that they've won. If you need to contact support, you can either reach out to the partner during your 30-day trial or directly to Altaro, as long as you reference I as the partner. So that way we can put the correct licensing quote to the correct company. On top of that, we can also offer monthly billing or annual billing. Altaro will also offer Office 365 backup. That will be done in the cloud and can be managed via the CMC. That also will depend on the amount of active users and mailboxes, but there is no concurrent set limit. There will be educational discount as long as you provide a letter signed, for example, by a teacher or a manager, with showing all 4 pages of the document and it is electronically or manually signed. You can also go to altaro.com/VM-backup to view all of the features for both the Hyper-V and the VM backup. On top of that, it is unbeatable value, avoided bloated prices. You can pay per host or per VM, not per socket. You can choose. The average cost for 5 hosts and 2 sockets. There's a comparison I will include here. So Altaro would come in at £2,250 for 5 hosts and 2 sockets, which is unbeatable value, especially with added server costs. You can learn more about the proven benefits of Altaro Backup. Either attend a 30-minute live demo, question and answers, either with Altaro themselves or as a partner. You can watch a 10-minute demo with no registration required, and you can also find out what is new in Altaro version 8 of the VM Backup. You can get it up and running with Altaro VM Backup today, and you're more than welcome to download a trial in less than 15 minutes. Thank you for watching. If you need any further information on Altaro, the products or solutions, please contact us. The link will be in the description to the website and a link to the Altaro partnership on our website. If you need a one-to-one demo or you need pricing, quotes, anything like that, please let us know. Thank you. This is just a continuation on from the Altaro VM Backup video that I was just discussing about, and some of the features and the benefits to both Altaro VM Backup and Altaro VM Backup for Office 365. I've also included a webinar for Altaro VM Backup version 8, and it will continue just after this now. It lasts for around 45 minutes. If you require any further information from me or from Altaro, please contact either myself or Altaro. Links will be in the description, but please let Altaro know that I am the partner, because otherwise they will not. They will bill you rather than billing the partner, so you won't be able to get it cheaper.
All right, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're at in the world. Hello everybody, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar on an introduction to Altaro VM Backup version 8. Got a lot of great information to go through today here with you, really excited to do so, and we got a lot of stuff to cover, so let's go ahead and dive right in. So first off, my name is Andy Serwich. I'm a technical evangelist here at Altaro Software. And I'm going to be taking you through the product today. Before my time with Altaro Software, I spent, dating myself a bit here, 15 to 18 years, somewhere in that area, in the IT space, IT departments, and also managed services providers. So very familiar with the unique situations that come up with IT administrators and backup and recovery. So looking forward to talking you through today's content. So let's talk about what our agenda is for this session. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about Altaro, who we are, what we're about, what we do, that type of thing. And then we'll get into a product overview where we're going to talk about, the product from a 10,000 foot view, and then we'll drill down into the individual features and the stuff that you're looking for in a backup application. From there, we'll talk about installation and deployments, backing up and restoring VMs, what the different additions and some of the licensing information is. And at the end, we'll touch briefly on our partner program and Q&A. Now, one thing about the Q&A I always like to point out, if you have questions, feel free to ask them, as we go through the session today. And if I can organically address, any of the questions as we go through, I certainly will. Otherwise, I'll be sure to pick up all the questions at the end of the session today. So with that said, let's go ahead and dig into Altaro. What are we all about? So we've been around for 10 years now, since 2009. So we're by no means new to the industry. We've been around for a while. And worldwide, we've got 50,000 plus customers. We've got 10,000 plus partners worldwide, which 2,000 of those are MSPs. We've got a lot of independent 5-star reviews out there on the interwebs. So if you're interested in reviewing some of those, I'm certainly you can find them. Strong growth over the last couple of years as well. We've seen a lot of strong growth over the last couple of years, and we're excited to have much more. Let's talk about our vision. And I think it's always important when companies give these webinars that you talk about what the company's vision is. And really what our vision is to become the #1 virtual backup and replication solution built for MSPs and IT departments. And as far as our solutions go, we've got Altaro VM Backup, which is what you're here learning about today. We've also got Altaro VM Backup for MSPs, and we also have Altaro Office 365 Backup, not only for MSPs, but also for individual organizations and IT departments as well. Talking about us as a company, I always also think it's important to talk about, what are the core values of the company? Because I remember back when I was an IT administrator evaluating solutions, it wasn't enough that the solution was a fit for me, but the vendor had to be a fit for me as well. So I always think it's important to share this stuff. So, the 4 things that we really pride ourselves on, the 4 pillars, I guess I would call them, is first being ease of use. Ease of use has been a design goal since the inception of the company. The application has to be easy to use, and you have to be able to start your first backup within 15 minutes. That's our goal from day one. But with that, we also want to provide outstanding support. I have nothing but amazing things to say about our support team. We provide 24/7 support, and our calls are answered in less than 30 seconds by a human. I'm going to be talking about our support guys a little bit later, so I won't cover that much more now. Additionally, we like to pair our product and our support stuff with exceptional educational resources, like this webinar. In addition to this webinar, we also provide a lot of community resources centered around Hyper-V, Azure, Office 365, VMware, and MSPs specifically. We've got 3 blogs out there, one for Hyper-V, Azure, Office 365, another blog for VMware, and another one specifically geared at MSPs. You can go to altaro.com, and up at the top, the bar there, you'll see a section for blogs and educational resources. I highly encourage you to check that out if you're interested. And then our 4th pillar really is a empowered channel. We see, we really see the power of the channel, and we think that the channel is a great way to, service our customers and get out to our customers in a more efficient way. So definitely we see the value, and we definitely like to be part of that empowered channel. A couple of the customers that we have, some of the bigger ones, most of these you see are very large companies, and this comes down to, a specific piece or a specific department within these organizations are actually using our product. My personal favorite there is NASA. I just think it's really, really cool that NASA uses our product because I'm a big space guy. But definitely we're proud to be able to say that a lot of these large organizations use our product. So definitely we're very proud of that fact. A couple of the awards that we've won over the years, some of the more recent ones in 2019, we've got the InfoSec Award winner up there in the top right. Kind of the center of the screen, we've got the Global Excellence Award winner for Virtualization Backup Solutions Developer, and a couple other awards that we've gotten over the years there as well. And then let's get into our product review, the thing that you're here to listen to today. So first off, let's kind of start with a, kind of an overview. What is Altaro VM Backup version 8? And really what this product amounts to is it provides backup services for virtual machines running on both Hyper-V and VMware. And it's designed, again, specifically for MSPs and IT departments, and it's designed to be easy to use and deploy. So really, again, 15 minutes to your first backup from the initial installation, and really minimal ongoing maintenance because, again, I've sat in the IT administrator seat for many years. There are a lot more things going on in the IT department than just backups. So definitely we want to make sure that it's easy to use and it's powerful and it's reliable. That way you can get back to all the other stuff that you've got that you've got on your plate as an IT administrator. So, we do everything that you're looking for in a backup application. We provide, advanced functionality like deduplication, offsite replication, file and exchange item level restores, things like that. I'm going to be covering those in a little bit more detail later. It scales. So, we work great for small environments, and it scales up really well to larger environments as well. And we fully support Hyper-V clusters, including CSV file systems and SMB3. And we also support VMware vCenter and vSphere clusters as well. And we're really optimized for performance. Not only do we focus on ease of use, but we also focus on making the application as lean and mean as possible. So we focus on fast, small backups that are easy on resources. And I'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about deduplication later in the session. So a little bit more of a product overview. Really we provide unbeatable value. Like I said, we provide all the tools that you're looking for in a backup application. And I mentioned our 24/7 support, with that lightning fast call response of 30 seconds or less. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more later, so I won't spend too much time on it now. So let's actually drill down into the specific benefits. So again, the core product here is we're backing up virtual machines that are based on Hyper-V and VMware. And those backups can be done hot. The VMs can be live, they can be up and running, zero downtime required to do those backups. And the way that we do that is we're facilitating the backup through the APIs that Microsoft and VMware provide in their stack for backup vendors. And we can back up all guest operating systems. We can back up Linux, Unix, we can back up old versions of Windows. The key point here that I always like to point out is we can back up older operating systems as long as they are supported to run on the hypervisor that they're on. So, I think of like Windows Server 2019. If you're running Hyper-V on Windows Server 2019, some of the older versions of Windows are not officially supported by Microsoft. So that's what you got to be careful of there. So make sure that if you want us to back up the application, back up a specific virtual machine or an older guest operating system, make sure that it's actually supported to run on the hypervisor that you're running it on. We can also back up Exchange and SQL virtual machines, and we'll handle the transaction log truncation for you. We've got change block tracking, so we're using the change block tracking features inside of VMware and Hyper-V to get, a real-time change tracking, which allows us to be quicker and more efficient when we come around and actually do the backups. We do compression. We actually do encryption as well. So for those organizations that, maybe you have to adhere to certain industry compliancy, or maybe you just want to encrypt your backups for best practices, we do offer that 256-bit AES encryption, both at rest and in transit. And we also do host level concurrency, meaning that we can do more than one backup at a time, assuming that your hardware can handle that, right? By default, we'll do 4 concurrent backup jobs per host at a time, per hypervisor. And what we found is that 4 seems to be kind of the sweet spot as far as speed and overhead of resources go. And that is modifiable if you want to, but we found that 4 tends to be the sweet spot. One of our newer features that we have is grandfather, father, son archiving, or we just call it GFS for short. So what this is really useful for those organizations that need really long-term retention, but they don't want to keep, retention daily during that longer time period. So what you do is you can enable a grandfather, father, son, and you kind of get that whole, okay, we're going to do 1 backup for 12 weeks, and then we're going to do 1 backup per month for 12 months, and then we're going to do 1 backup per year for 2 years, kind of get these longer point in time snapshots for those organizations that need longer retention. So very useful in those situations. Another new feature that we have, new-ish, we've had it for a little while now, is continuous data protection. So by default, when you enable CDP on a backup, we will start backing up that workload every 15 minutes. You can increase that to 1 backup every 5 minutes, assuming that your hardware is capable of handling it. Again, you want to make sure that it really comes down to disk speed. Really, is that the disk churn can handle doing a backup every 5 minutes. And really, what this does is it reduces your RPOs down to just a couple of minutes. So I see some organizations that really need this. They're really liking this feature. Away and optimize replication. This is another newish feature we have. But basically what this does is, we've had offsite backups for a long time, the ability to send those backups offsite. But with our offsite backups solution, if you had to do a recovery from the offsite location, you had to actually do a recovery job, which, if it's a large VM, could take some time. So what we've done is we've added this replication feature, which kind of, you're standing up something of a warm site, like a DR warm site somewhere, that in the event that your main location becomes a smoking crater in the ground for whatever reason, you can go to that offsite location, and it's literally as simple as just turning on those VMs and going. So, there's no restore time required. Basically, you're down as long as it takes to figure out that, whoa, hey, there's something wrong, and 2, go over to your recovery location, flip the switches, and there you go. So again, replication frequency there, you can do as little as 5 minutes, or you can go as much as 12 hours. What I found is that for most customers, that's going to depend on how big is the internet pipe in between the 2 locations. Usually is what determines how often they're going to replicate. And the rate of change of data as well plays a part there too. So let's talk about some of our underlying technology. So one of my personal favorite things about our application is our deduplication technology. We call it our augmented inline deduplication. And you think about deduplication, really in the industry, there's 2 methodologies of thought, I guess I would say. The first is what they call post-process deduplication, where I'm going to send all the data to the storage location, and then I'm going to dedupe it. The problem with that is you're sending all of these blocks that you don't need to send across the wire. And that's where inline deduplication comes in. And that's what we do. We actually do the deduplication as part of the backup job. That way we're only sending the blocks to the storage that we absolutely need to send. And what this really amounts to is it gives us, significantly lower storage requirements, much faster backups, less data transferred, which in the end comes out to, bandwidth savings. And the other nice thing about this is that our deduplication is not per job. It is, across everything in the backup storage repository. So if you're sending 100 virtual machines to that storage location, we dedupe across all of those backups. So really what it does is the more that you're sending to that storage repository, the more storage efficiency you're getting out of that location. And the other key thing here is that, we pair this technology with a variable block size, which allows us to get really efficient storage savings. And it also prevents this feature from being taxing on server performance. That's a question I get all the time, and really we have very minimal overhead for this feature. So overall, it's been very widely appreciated amongst our customers. And I've just got some statistics here to kind of show you where our deduplication comparison lines up with some of our competitors. This is for Altaro VM Backup version 7. With version 8, it's very similar to these statistics that you see here. You see we come out quite a bit lower than some of our competitors. And then we also did a sample of 100 customers' data. And we compared those data sets with our deduplication versus some of our competitors, and we come out to roughly 63% savings when compared to some of our competitors. And then from there, let's talk about a couple of additional newish features that we have in the product. So another one of my favorites here, cloud backup to Azure. So I mentioned offsite backup storage a little bit earlier. And we can offsite backups to pretty much any location that you control. Maybe it's a colo data center somewhere. Maybe it's a data center you control. You install our offsite server software at that location, which is no additional licensing costs. And that offsite server basically acts as a catcher's mitt for the backup storage. Now, where this particular feature comes into play is if maybe you don't have a colo data center somewhere or a data center you control elsewhere. In this case, you can actually utilize Microsoft's Azure Public Cloud as your offsite backup location. And what this does is it utilizes Azure's block blob storage, which is their most cost competitive storage that they have. And it also allows you to go straight to Azure storage without the need of an extra virtual machine. With Azure, we don't have the requirement of an Altaro offsite server at that location. You can go directly to the storage account. It's literally as easy as logging into Azure, provisioning a new storage account, and then they have what's called a connection string. It's just a long string of random characters. You grab that, paste it into our application, and then we can start using it as an offsite location for backups. Very efficient, very easy to use. And the other important thing is that feature still allows us to use our compression, our encryption, our deduplication, basically all the bells and whistles that we're doing for all the other backups. So we've talked about backups. Restoration is really the important part, right? Because what good are backups if you can't restore? So we have like a number of different options when it comes to restoration. We can do a full virtual machine restore. We can restore it as a clone. We can restore a different version of the virtual machine. We can recover to a different host. One key point that I always like to point out there, we can recover to a different host of the same hypervisor type. We don't support cross hypervisor restoration. So if you're running a virtual machine on Hyper-V, you can't recover it to VMware and vice versa. If it's a Hyper-V VM, it has to be recovered to a Hyper-V host. If it's a VMware VM, it has to be recovered to a VMware host. So I always like to point that out. Additionally, we have an option called boot from backup, which allows you to boot a virtual machine from the backup storage, and I'll get into that a little bit here in a second. We also offer granular restoration options. So if you want to grab just an individual file, you have the ability to do that. If you have an Exchange, a virtual machine on premises, and you need to grab a specific piece of mail from that Exchange instance, we have the ability to do that. And you can recover just a specific virtual disk if you want as well. So a lot of different restoration options there. I mentioned boot from backup earlier. Another one of my favorite features here. I have quite a few of them, but this one is really useful in a lot of situations. And the use case example I always give here is I was in a situation one time where I was supporting a medical customer. And the medical customer, their patient records database was huge. This SQL box, it was just a standalone SQL box. It was 2.5 terabytes in size, fairly sizable. And one day, this thing just fell flat on its face and wasn't coming back. Now, the backup application they were using at the time didn't have a feature like this. So we're talking about doing a full restoration of this machine, 2.5 terabytes. It took 18 hours, 18, 19 hours. And meanwhile, the organization's down, they can't service patients, things like that. It's not a good day, right? Now, with boot from backup, what it allows you to do is, you say, oh, hey, this virtual machine is down, it's offline, I need to do a recovery. With boot from backup, you can actually boot a copy of that virtual machine from the backup storage, and really you're down as long as it takes to realize there's an issue and for that virtual machine to boot from the backup storage. Now there's two different modes here. The first one is verification mode, where you just want to boot up that virtual machine just to make sure it works with the boot from backup feature, or we have recovery mode. And what this does is it boots the virtual machine up, and in the background it starts a recovery job. So users are up and running, they're using the server. Meanwhile, that recovery job is happening in the background. And what we're doing is we're tracking all the changes that are being made while that recovery operation is happening. Once the recovery job is done, it says, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Administrator, I'm all done now. Let me know when you would like to commit changes. You, the administrator, say, okay, click commit the changes. We'll shut down that instant boot version of the virtual machine. We'll roll up all the changes that occurred during the day, and then we'll boot that newly restored, fully recovered instance of the virtual machine. So really, it's a very painless process, and it really helps in those sticky situations. We also have some sandbox restore and verification options. So if you just want to verify the backup folders to make sure all the file pointers are happy and healthy, make sure the file system is happy and healthy, we have that option. You can schedule a full test restore. Can we take what's in the backup storage and fashion a virtual machine out of it? That's what that test restore does. And then also we have the backup health monitor, which will scan all of the backup storage during a defined schedule and just kind of make sure that there are no bad blocks, there's no corruption, that type of things. And if it finds any, it'll be sure to let you know as well. So some handy features there just to kind of make you feel warm and fuzzy when it comes to the health of your backups. So with that, I have a couple more slides after this, but I wanted to show you the application a little bit as well. So I've got a lab environment here, and this is the on-premises application here. So we also have what's called the Cloud Management Console, which is it's a web-based utility for managing multiple instances of this application. But what you're seeing here on the screen right now is the on-premises version of this application. So you see here that I'm on the dashboard. I can see kind of all the high-level overview stuff of the backup environment. So I can see, what my backup drive status is, how much free space do I have, how much are my backups taking. Here are my active and upcoming operations. You see I don't have anything happening right now. If there were any active backup jobs, you would actually see them happening in this section right here. Additionally, we've got our deduplication and compression statistics here. So you can see that my total protected data comes out to 671, and it's been deduplicated down to 374. So I've got about 44% savings here. There's not a lot of similarity between workloads in this lab. There's a lot of different stuff in here. But again, the more VMs you have, the more efficient that percentage becomes. And you can also see recent operations here. Green obviously is good, red is bad. So you can see over the last couple of days, there were a few random issues in this lab. But it's good so you can actually see what's going on. You can drill down into these messages too, which I'll show you here in a second. So when you install the application for the first time, it'll actually direct you to the first 3 main steps that you have to take to get things going. First thing it'll do is it will send you to the host screen. And here you can see, any hosts that I'm providing backup services for, and if they're associated with a cluster. So you can see here I have 2 Hyper-V hosts that are in this HVCLSTR cluster. Adding a host is really easy. You just select, whether it's a Hyper-V host or cluster, or whether it's a standalone ESXi host or a vCenter instance. Pop in your credentials, and then we'll add it to the list. I mentioned concurrency earlier. So like I said, by default, we will do 4 backups per host at a time. If for some reason, you need to drop that down to 1 backup at a time, maybe you have a host that is, really overtaxed right now for some reason, you can come in here and, check this off, and we'll do 1 at a time to kind of save on overhead. And then as far as next steps for getting your first backup started after you add in your host, we'll direct you to this backup locations view. Center column is local on-premises backups. Right-hand column are your offsite locations. So you can see here, I am just using a network share to host my backups. And we have lots of different options here. You can use a physical drive, USB, ASATA, iSCSI, an internal drive. You can do a network path to a NAS or some other network location. As far as offsite locations go, you can see I'm actually using an Azure storage account. And we have a lot of different options here for offsite storage. You can do a physical drive, you can do a drive rotation, you can do an Altaro offsite server, you can do cloud backup to an Azure storage account. Let me just show you really quick how easy that is. As far as the Azure storage account goes, if you need instructions on setting that up, you can click this link right here and we'll open up the how-to page. And what you'll do is you just grab, like I said, that connection string. Grab that connection string, paste it in here, and click finish, and you're done. That's it. Very easy, very simple to get set up. And then from there, we have a number of different various backup settings. What are your backup schedules? You can define those here. I mentioned continuous data protection settings. If you want to enable that for any of your virtual machines, you can do that here and configure how often they happen. What are your retention policies? I won't spend a lot of time on this particular section, but one thing I always like to point out is you can have different retention policies for offsite backups and different ones for on-site backups. So if you only want a week on premises, but 5 years off-site, we can do that. So you have the ability to define those differently. A couple other things, VSS settings. If you want to disable VSS, volume shadow, copy inside of any of the virtual machines, you can do that here. Advanced settings, this is where you would control encryption. If there are any ISOs attached to the virtual machine, whether you want to exclude those, if you want to enable or disable change block tracking, if you want to exclude any drives, you can do that here. The most common thing I see for excluded drives is maybe somebody has a SQL virtual machine that they're running SQL backups to like a secondary VHD or a VHDX or a VMDK. You don't want to back up backups, so you exclude that drive. That's just one common use case that I run into there. If you need to free up storage on one of your backup repositories, you can do that here, and then also the master encryption key. So this is the encryption key that we'll actually use to encrypt the backups. One thing that I always like to emphasize here, when you set this encryption key, document the heck out of it. Document it, because if you go ahead and set this, forget to document it, take backups for a year, and then need to recover, not even Altaro support can help you. We have no way of recovering your encryption key. So when you set your encryption key, document it, because you're going to need it when you do a recovery. So a couple of other things I want to mention. I want to be cognizant of time, so I won't spend too much more time on this. We do have a couple of email notifications. By default, we will log to the Windows event log on the machine running our software. Backups, if you want to start a backup manually, you can come in here, select which virtual machines you want to do a backup, and click Take Backup. Same thing with offsite copies. If you want to initiate a manual offsite copy, you can do so here. Additionally, we have the option to seed to disk. So let's say you have a fairly large virtual machine that you want to get to the offsite backup repository, but you don't want to send it across the wire. You can seed that to disk, send that to your offsite location, open up the Altaro offsite server console, and actually import that data to do your initial offsite copy if you have a rather large virtual machine. Replication settings are configured right in here. It's fairly simple to configure. Again, you have to have an Altaro offsite server somewhere and have it configured for replication. If you're interested in that, you can go out to our support fax. It's just basically, you go to our website, altaro.com. You'll see a support section, and we have a repository there with a bunch of knowledge-based articles that'll walk you through how to set up the replication. Restoration, I mentioned we have a lot of different options here. We can do as a clone, as a disk, file level granular restore, exchange granular restore, or boot from backup. A lot of different options there. And then the other thing, again, being cognizant of time here, get help. Support is never far away. If you ever need help, we've got support baked right into the application here. You can actually launch live chat from within the application. And it will actually tell you what the response times currently are as well. So email response, you can see, is currently less than an hour. Phone response is less than 30 seconds. Live chat response is 16 seconds as well. So again, support is never far away. So with that, let's hop back to the slide deck. I have a few more slides to cover. Let me switch that back. There we go. So I mentioned the Altaro Cloud Management Console a little bit earlier. Really what this is a web-based console that you can use to manage multiple instances of our application. It's designed for multi-tenancy in mind. So for you MSPs that are out there, it's designed to help you manage our backup application across your entire customer base. If you're a standalone organization or just an IT department, this tool is also used to manage this application amongst several different locations. So if you have multiple locations with multiple data centers, this is going to be your management tool for managing our backups across all those disparate locations. And the other nice thing about this tool is it's real time. You think about a lot of our competitors' web-based tools, and there's a bit of a delay. And the other nice thing about our tool, our web-based management tool, is that you can actually do backup and recoveries from it. A lot of our competitors are reporting and licensing only. So from there, a couple other things to cover here. Let's talk about installation. Installation is literally as simple as 1, 2, 3. You download the exe. You execute it. It just has to be installed on a Windows box somewhere in the environment. If it's a standalone Hyper-V host, you can install it right on the Hyper-V host if you want to. Just has to be a Windows box somewhere in the environment. Supported hypervisors for Hyper-V, we support anything 2008 R2 or newer, including Windows Server Core. For VMware, we support ESXi 5.0 and newer. One thing to note, we do not support the free version of ESXi. That's because the backup APIs in ESXi free are set to read only, and there's no way around that, unfortunately. A couple of additional tools that are available. The middle one I've already mentioned, the Altaro Offsite Server. Again, that's just a piece of software that gets installed offsite that acts as a catcher's-mitt for the offsite backups. Again, there's no additional licensing cost for that offsite server. The top one, the remote management tools. So you don't have to actually be logged on to the machine that the software is installed on to manage it. You can also use our cloud management console, like I mentioned a second ago, or you can use the remote management tools from like your laptop or your workstation to remotely manage the application. So the demo I just showed you, I was using the remote management tools to connect remotely to the machine running our software. And from there, let's talk about the different editions and licensing. So the key thing here is for non-MSPs, we license at the host level, not the socket level, not the CPU socket, at the host level. Again, we not only want to be simple and easy to use from a technical perspective, but from a vendor and just dealing with us perspective, we want to be very easy to work with as well. So we don't want to make you count things like CPU sockets, or if you add an additional CPU to a host later on, now you have to worry about going and buying more backup licenses. We don't want to do any of that. So we license at the host level. So we have a free version that's free for 2 virtual machines forever. But we also have our paid versions as well, starting with standard, and that will give you backup services for 5 virtual machines on a given host. And you get all the freeware edition features plus offsite backups, encryption, all of the stuff that you've come to know in a backup application. Then we get up to unlimited, and that will cover unlimited virtual machines per host. And then we're also adding in the augmented inline deduplication, the boot from backup features, support for clustering and vCenter, exchange level restores, things like that. Then we get into the unlimited plus, which adds features like WAN optimized replication, continuous data protection, the ability to use Azure as an offsite location, and access to that cloud management console I mentioned earlier. And then if you're an MSP, you get all the bells and whistles at a pay per VM per month model. If you want a little bit more information on that, you go to altaro.com/vm-backup/pricing.php for more information. Let's talk about our other solutions in case you're interested. So if you're using Office 365, we do have a solution for that. It comes to a surprise to many people that Microsoft does not back up and does not natively provide the ability to recover Office 365 mails. Microsoft is responsible for providing the mail services, making sure they're available for people to consume. They are not responsible for handling unexpected data loss. So that's where we come in with our Office 365 backup application. This says for MSPs, but this can also be used by organizations and IT departments as well. It uses that same cloud management console to handle the management of the solution. You don't have to provide any storage. We handle all the storage for you. We actually host that storage in Microsoft Azure. It's fully industry compliant. We handle it for you. That way you don't have to worry about providing your own storage in that situation. The other nice thing about this is that we can protect emails, contacts, calendars, attachments, and you can recover entire mailboxes or a specific item if you want as well. And that's paid at a per mailbox per month model if you are an MSP, or if you're an end user organization or IT department, it goes in 10 mailbox increments per year. So you pay for 10 mailboxes at a time for an entire year or more if you want a discount, and we'll handle the mail backups for you. So the other thing I want to do is just cover our roadmap here really quick. That way people know what's coming up. So we actually have a newish product coming out here, physical server backup. It's going to be freeware at first. We actually have that in public beta right now if you feel like testing it. So you get more information on that on our website. And that'll allow you to back up physical machines. So we've talked with a lot of customers and gotten a lot of feedback that, most organizations, there's always that one machine that is still a physical box, and they want some way of protecting that. We're going to be providing that in our backup stack here. Additionally, for our Office 365 product, we've got a couple of new things coming. We've got SharePoint and OneDrive for business support coming later this year. We also have granular user access rights coming, and self-service end user portal if you're an MSP. So those will be some nice things coming. For a VM backup application, the one that I just showed you, we're going to be having support for multiple offsite backup locations coming. So if you want to offsite to more than one location, we're going to have that functionality. And in addition to the Azure offsite support for offsite backups, we'll be adding support for Amazon S3 and Wasabi as well. And then later in the year, we'll be having another iteration of the physical server backup with some additional bells and whistles. And then for H1 next year, we're going to be having the ability to actually protect virtual machines running in Azure and DR as a service as well. So I mentioned support a couple of times during the webinar. I have nothing but amazing things to say about our support team. They do a fantastic job. They provide 24/7 support at no extra cost. And you get that lightning fast call response guarantee of less than 30 seconds. And you're actually going to get a human that answers the phone in less than 30 seconds. And the other great thing is we don't do tiered support here at Altaro. You're not going to get a tier 1 person that's just reading through a script and says, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on again? You're not going to get that with us. Everybody who answers the phone is a product expert, and they will own your issue from start to finish. So again, nothing but great things to say about our support team. A little quick information here about our partner program. Again, we are 100% channel focused. If you sign up as a partner with us, you get free NFRs, you get lead support and more. Get a local presence and access to our Altaro partner portal. If you want a little bit more information on that, you go to altaro.com/partner-program.php for more information. If you're an MSP, we offer this application in a MSP model that's designed for multi-tenancy. It's got a pay per VM per month model, and there are no contracts. So I know we start with 10 VMs, no binding contracts. You can scale up to basically as large as you want to go. And then from there, just kind of summing it all up, again, we provide a hassle-free, easy-to-use application for Hyper-V and VMware. that gets you up and running in less than 15 minutes, providing unbeatable value that I hopefully have conveyed to you today. And you get that with our lightning call fast response time. A little bit more contact information here. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to support@altaro.com or sales@altaro.com for more information. Again, we have live chat available as well if you prefer that for some of your questions. You go to help.altaro.com/support/home for more information as well. And with that, I will take a few questions. We're a little over time, but I'll go ahead and take a few questions here. Got a question here to back up regular servers. By regular server, I'm guessing physical servers. And in our roadmap I showed just a second ago, we do have physical server backup coming. Again, it's in public beta right now. Go to our website to find more information about that. If a backup was missed, how do you start one to catch up? So what you can do is, if a backup is missed, maybe it fails for some reason, maybe the VM was offline or something, what you can do is either wait for the scheduled job to happen again, or you just go to the backup section of the UI, click the checkbox next to the virtual machine, say take backup, and just do one manually that way as well. So, and additionally, if you're using our notification options, if a backup is missed or failed for some reason, we'll let you know about that as well. If there are any other questions, feel free to use them. Feel free to use the GoToWebinar questions form. If you have any more, I'll leave it open for another 30, 45 seconds here if you have any others. And if you think of any further questions, even after this webinar, feel free to email me directly at Andy, A-N-D-Y, @altaro.com. I'm not going to make you spell my last name because it messes most people up. So it's just simple, Andy, A-N-D-Y, @altaro.com. Got a couple more questions here. Any agents for Android? No, we can't protect Android, can't protect that operating system right now. If you're talking about managing the solution from Android, our cloud management console, while it's not optimized for mobile, you can log into it with mobile. So you might have to scroll and pinch and zoom around a little bit, but you do have that option. All right. Well, with that, I think I'm going to let everybody get back to their day. I want to say thank you for attending. Really enjoyed having you here. Really enjoyed conveying some of the information to you. And hope to see you again for a future webinar with us, whether it's on our products or whether it's one of our other educational webinars on Hyper-V, VMware, or MSP information. So with that, I'll leave you all to your day. Have a good one, and thanks for watching. All right, well, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you're at in the world, and welcome back to another Altaro Software sponsored webinar, this one on what's new in Windows Server 2022. So my name is Andy Serwich. I'm a technical evangelist with Altaro Software and Hornet Security, and with me I got a good friend of mine, Paul Schneckenberg. How's it going, Paul?
I'm pretty good. How are you, Andy?
Doing good, doing good. Hey, it is what, 11 p.m. at night where you're at over there in Australia?
No, it's 10 p.m. It's 10 p.m. So it's not too bad.
I was close. I was close. Anyway, we appreciate you joining us for the session today. We got a lot of great content to get through, and we have a lot of content to get through. So I think what we should do is we'll just kind of dive right in and just talk about our agenda for the day first before we get too much further. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to do some introductions, and then we're going to get to the what's new stuff, right? We're going to talk about new features. We're going to talk about security enhancements, networking improvements, addition changes in licensing. What's the story with Hyper-V Server? If you keep track of the news regarding Hyper-V and just the general Microsoft community, you may or may not have seen some angsty community posts, I guess I would say, over Hyper-V Server. So we're going to be talking all about that. We're going to talk about where Azure Stack HCI fits in, and I've also got a demo on Azure Stack HCI management and some other things centered around that. And then, really kind of the section that I'm really looking forward to is just kind of a discussion with Paul and you guys, the attendees. What does it all mean? Where are we all going with this information? So that's going to be a great section. Looking forward to that. And then finally, we'll do some wrap up and Q&A at the end of the session. Now, quick note on the Q&A. Feel free to use the questions form in GoToWebinar as we step through the content. You can put a question in anytime you want. If we can kind of organically stop and address any question as we go along, we'll certainly do so. Otherwise, we'll try and get to as many of the questions during the Q&A at the end as we can. Quite frequently, we don't get to them all because of time constraints. So usually what we do is we do some sort of follow-up blog post, or what we've been doing lately is doing a follow-up video where we cover all the questions that we didn't get to. So keep an eye out for that. If you ask a question today that didn't get answered, we will make sure you get an answer at some point in the coming week or two. So with that, let's get to our introductions. So first off, my name is Andy Serwich. I think we've got there we go. There's my smiling face. So again, my name is Andy Serwich. I'm a technical evangelist with Hornet Security and Altaro Software. I'm also a Microsoft MVP in the Cloud and Data Center Management competency. I was originally a MVP in the Hyper-V competency before they combined competency areas. So the Hyper-V news is especially interesting to me because of that. If you're interested in connecting with me on Twitter, my handle is @aserwich. Apologies, you'll have to spell the last name. I keep meaning to change that at some point, but well, not enough hours in the day, I guess. So, and Paul, I'll hand it over to you to do your own introductions, my friend.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Schnackenberg. I'm originally from Sweden, but I've been in Australia for just over 20 years. I run my own business down here. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, and I'm an editor for the one of the dojos, soon to be two of the dojos on Altaro's site. I'm at Paul Schnack. I'm not a frequent Twitterer, but or tweeter person, but you can reach out to me there if you want to. Back to you, Andy.
Sounds good. Thanks, Paul. And then just a quick word about the sponsor of today's webinar, Hornet Security. So we are the most comprehensive cloud security service for Microsoft 365 in the market. So we do spam filtration, advanced email security, continuity archiving, compliance requirements, backup and recovery. We also do all of that same stuff for on-premise mail servers as well. So if you're running Microsoft Exchange on-prem, or maybe you're using Google Apps, or maybe some sort of weird on-prem open source mail server, they still are out there in the wild. We provide services for those as well. On top of that, we can host mailboxes with full security. We do web security as well, and backup and recovery, which I'll show you a little bit of that when we get to the Azure Stack HCI section near the end of the session today. Now with that, I think we've got a poll next, don't we, Paul?
That might be true. There we are. No.
Oh, that's right. I've got two more Hornet security slides. So just to give you an idea of, the reach of the organization. So we are a global company. We've got 9 data centers, and I think this slide is a little dated. I need to update this. I think it's 19 offices around the globe now. So we are a fairly large organization. We do have boots on the ground in many countries worldwide. And the next slide, we actually talk about, kind of where the company got its start. So really, the company started back in the 2008-ish time frame. Can we advance that slide, Paul?
Sure.
Yeah, appreciate it. And so yeah, the company got started back in that 2008 timeframe. Really started with archiving and email encryption, and then as we got more into modern day, started working on things more focused to the M365 stack. And then Hornet Security really started making a lot of strategic acquisitions, like the acquisition of Altaro Software, to really round out that product portfolio. That way we worry about the security so that you can worry about what it is you do, right? So really excited to be part of this organization. A lot of great features, and we hope you'll check those out when you get a chance. So with that, now I think we're onto the poll, right? I'm gonna laugh if I'm wrong again.
Yeah, you're wrong.
All right, I know you put this one in here, Paul. Did you want to cover this really quick?
Oh yeah, so we got a few cartoons in here by a guy called Forrest Brazil. He does these cartoons that are IT related, and I just thought you've probably seen this one or a variant of it, but it's just it's kind of different depending on which industry you're in, and I certainly can remember turning the servers off to see whether anybody protests. So probably don't want to do that if you're in a hospital. Right, Paul?
The good old scream test. Yep, we've all been there. So yeah, I think we've got a poll next, right after the new features slide.
Yeah. So
I can launch the poll. There we go. Okay. So yeah,
I
everyone,
have
we've got a
launched
quick.
it.
Yep, I see it. Yep, we've got it up here. So just a quick poll. We always like to kind of poll the audience just to see where you guys are at. Really what we wanted to see is what you're most excited about with the release of Windows Server 2022. I will say what's interesting about this particular release is it didn't receive a lot of fanfare from the Microsoft side of the world. So some folks aren't even aware that it came out yet. But for those that are aware, what features or what are you most excited about? And we've got multiple options here. Storage, that includes S2D, Azure Stack HCI, Hyper-V, Active Directory, and other roles and features. And if I had to guess here, Paul, I would guess people are probably most excited about Azure Stack HCI.
Yeah, that's not what the poll is saying, though. It's interesting. It's really interesting. Just over 50% have just voted, and currently Hyper-V is in the lead.
And there is one trick question on this poll as well.
Okay.
I know which one it is. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close that poll out and let's display the results. And I'm gonna go ahead and share those results here. And you're right, Azure Stack HCI at 20%. I'd be curious to see those in the chat. Is that because you feel it's very Azure centric and that's why the low interest, or maybe it's just so new that you guys don't want to start using it yet? So if you want to just drop a response to that in the questions form, if you have any feedback, I'd be interested to know. But like you said, Hyper-V is the big one here with 65%, Active Directory at 54%. And when I say there's a little bit of a trick question, there's not a whole lot new that's in Active Directory, right, Paul?
Nope.
Yep.
Nope.
Yep. There's not a whole lot that's new in Active Directory. So that was kind of a little bit of a mean trick on my part. But I was kind of curious to see, whether people are expecting there to be new features in AD or not. So that kind of confirms my suspicions that there's a large portion of the audience that does, that's expecting new features in AD, right? So I found that kind of interesting.
Yeah.
All right, well, appreciate the feedback, everyone, and we'll kind of scoot on to the next section of our presentation. So I just closed the slide, and I think we're on to you, right, Paul?
Yeah, I think so. So I'm going to, everybody's seen my pretty face now, so I'm going to kill my camera. And
yeah, we were, just so folks know, we were having some bandwidth issues to Australia just before the session. So we want to make sure you can hear what we're saying. So just imagine our smiling faces for the rest of the session, right?
Right, so excellent, and I'm calling out somebody from Perth here in the questions list, and then I'll get back to the questions when I'm stopped talking. So we're going to head straight into new features of Windows Server 2022, and essentially what happened here, and I'm still really funny that this guy is smiling so much when he's staring at a blank screen. I still think that's funny. Anyway. Windows Server 2022 came out in preview, then it came out, and Microsoft ran an event that took 2.5 hours, where they talked about the new features, and less than half of that was actually new features in Windows Server 2022. So they were, talking about other features that are adjacent to Windows Server 2022. So there's not a lot coming here, but there is some things. And we need to be aware of those, obviously, if we are in the Windows Server world. So storage migration services is one of those dark horses. I've used this in production a couple of times. It is a great feature. It's been around for a couple of versions now, and they have improved it. So if you have NetApp servers on premises, or you have Linux servers running Samba, or you have your Windows file server, including clustered file servers, you can migrate from an old file server on an earlier versions of Windows Server to a Windows Server 2022. And You can either run this as a proxy, so if you have multiple servers that you want to migrate from multiple servers to multiple servers, you can have this thing as a proxy in the middle. Now the traffic, the data doesn't actually go through the proxy, it's just the orchestration of the migration. Or you can have a pull server where the new server simply pulls the data from the old one. This is a seamless migration, so the end result is you have a new file server or a cluster of file servers that looks exactly like the old ones. All the data is the same, all the file share permissions are the same, all the ACLs are the same, all the names are the same, so your end users notice no difference, but you are now having a file server on a modern operating system. And you can go back, I think, to 2012 or even 2012 R2, something like that. One of the new features here is it's Azure File Sync Aware. So if you have a file server that is syncing to Azure for backup, disaster recovery, and bottomless storage, essentially, the storage migration service will be aware of this as it is migrating the data, so it's not pulling it too fast, because if you have files that are not actually physically present on the file server, they're going to be pulled down from Azure, and that pipe to the internet is probably a lot slower than the pipe between the two file servers in your data center. So that's kind of cool. That's kind of useful. Scalability has massively increased. There was no jump between Windows Server 16 and 19. So we have a big jump here to Windows Server 2022. So you can have 48 terabytes of memory in a physical server. You can have 2048 cores or logical processors. So if you have multi-threading, that's just over 1,000 cores in a physical machine. That is going to be important to absolutely zero people on this call, because nobody can afford those big machines. But do know that Microsoft only presents figures like this when they have physically tested it. So somewhere on Microsoft's campus there is a machine with 48,000 gigabytes of memory physically installed in it. This will only be important if you are running really, really big workloads in Azure and you want to have really big virtual machines in Azure, because they will eventually run on Server 2022 and be able to have really, really big virtual machines. The server core container images have been shrunk by about 1 gigabyte. The nano core for new applications is, or the nano container image is 100 megabytes. And we have GPU DirectX support in containers. And we have the group managed service accounts. So the way to manage accounts for containers without having to domain join your host. That is another new feature that we've got. So that could be useful if you're running containers on your Windows server. And we have already covered that. We have another cartoon here, and I suspect that most people on this call can relate to this one. So that's why we drive people away. If we have the old very strict approach to how we manage IT in a company, you end up with shadow IT. So there you go. We have a bunch of security enhancements. So secure core server. This is probably the big one. This is the big ticket item that Microsoft has made a big noise about. I've written a couple of articles on this. And essentially, if you've heard of secure core PCs that came out, I don't know, 1.5 years ago, something like that, the first ones from Microsoft, the core idea here being that you get a physical machine, a new device, or in this case, a server that is already protected. It's got all the right security features turned on out of the box. So if you buy a Dell or an HP or a Lenovo server that is a secure core server, these things are all turned on out of the box, and all the firmware drivers are signed and properly set up, and everything else is ready to go. This is a really important feature because UEFI attacks are increasing. We have a bunch of links on the very last slide. We'll post those into the to the chat window towards the end of the session. And one of those links is one that I put in literally 10 minutes before we started this presentation, which talks about UEFI malware that has been found in the wild. So far so good. However, we're going to come back to why Secure Core Server, although a very interesting technology and does make you more secure, is perhaps not such a big deal as they try to make it out. So SMB gets a lot of attention in Windows Server. So the new one in Windows 11 and Windows Server is Server 2022 is SMB 3.11. So not because AES 128 is insecure, but if you need it for compliance reason, you can now use AES 256-bit encryption for your SMB traffic. You can encrypt your RDMA traffic, so your SMB direct over very, very fast NICs can be encrypted. Unlike Server 19 and earlier, you have more granular control over the encryption between nodes in a cluster. So you can choose to encrypt the traffic going from the servers to your clients accessing it, and or you can control the encryption between the nodes in the cluster. You also have signing, which used to be not very performant. That is now super fast. And then we have SMB over quick, and I was looking at the questions earlier on, and somebody did point out that they wanted to know more about this. So it's called SMB over quick. So quick is an internet standard, and Microsoft has a version of it that they've implemented and made open source in Windows Server, which is called SMB or MS Quick. And basically what this means is you can have a file server being accessed over the internet from domain joined machines, Windows 11 only, and with a third-party app from Android devices, totally securely without having to implement a VPN. This is a fantastic idea. It's really cool, but first of all, it's only in preview at the moment. Even though Server 2022 is out, it's still in preview. The second thing is, it is only available in a specific version of Windows Server 2022, and we'll come to that in a minute. Now, transport layer security, what we used to call SSL, which is now TLS, which is enabled by default in Windows Server 2022. It is a more secure way of doing TLS. It is the latest standard. It only supports 5 cipher suites, and those all support perfect forward security, which means that even if you store encrypted traffic, you capture it and store it and hope that in 2 years' time there will be some attack against TLS 1.3 that will enable you to decrypt it, you won't be able to, right? So that's a good feature. The other feature we've got is DNS over HTTPS, or DOE. So this is where your DNS traffic is encrypted so that it is harder to track what you're doing on the network. These are all good features, but you'll notice there's another set of asterisks there. So the first one is, if you're going to do SMB over quick, you can only do it with Windows 11 clients connecting to, well, I suppose you could have a Server 2022 connecting to a Server 2022 Azure Edition. So we'll come to editions in a little bit, but it needs to be this version of Windows Server. So your standard, so Windows Server 2022 Standard and Windows 2022 Server Data Center do not support SMB over quick. It has to be Azure Edition. And we'll talk about where you can run Azure Edition. And then we have that third-party Android client. Now, when it comes to DNS over HTTPS, that is only where Windows 11 and Server 2022 is a client talking to another third-party DNS server that supports HTTPS or DNS over HTTPS. The DNS server in Server 2022 does not support DNS over HTTPS. Yeah.
Hey, Paul, real quick, I want to jump in with the questions regarding SMB over quick. So yeah, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the addition section here in a second. But if you're more interested in specifically how the feature works, the previous webinar we did with Didier Van Hoy, we covered basically all the advanced storage stuff in Windows Server, and Didier actually did a demo of SMB over Quick. So that webinar is available on demand on our webinar section of our website. That said, I will make sure that we get that put in as a resource in the follow-up blog post in case you're interested in seeing that demo. So just an FYI.
Great, Andy. I totally agree. Seeing a demo, I mean, it is a really, really cool technology, and I can totally see users with some of my clients. I mean, it's a really cool technology, but it is gated behind that Azure Edition thing. So that's a little bit of a challenge. We've got some networking improvements. So a TCP high start and recent acknowledgement rack. Now we're really digging deep. If you want to learn more about these, we have links to the papers that talk about these. Basically, this is about both TCP and in some cases UDP being run over very, very fast networks. So, 10 gigabits, 40 gigabits, even 100 gigabits is starting to become commonplace. And on those sorts of networks, when traffic starts flowing, you want it to really ramp up quickly. And that's what these two technologies do. USO, UDP segmentation offload, is similar to how if you buy a network card today, it'll generally do TCP offloads. So it'll take a lot of the crunching of TCP packets as they come in and out of your network card and manage that with silicon directly on the network card to speed up the processing. This will do the same for UDP, not just for TCP. Azure Extended Network is a really interesting feature. This builds on VXLAN, which is originally a VMware technology for software-defined networking in Hyper-V. And basically what this technology means is that if you have machines on premises that needs to have specific IP addresses and you cannot re-IP them and migrate them to Azure, you can connect your on-premises network via a Windows Server 2022 server to Azure and keep your IP addresses as you move machines over there. Okay, SMB compression is another good, very useful feature. Generally, if we look at servers today and the statistics for these servers, we have plenty of CPU capacity spare. So by compressing SMB traffic, we gain bandwidth gains depending on what traffic you're sending over the wire. Of course, it depends on what if you've got 200 gigabytes of JPEG files, you're probably not going to see a great improvement. But depending on what you're transporting, you can see really good results here. Now you can set this at the server level, you can set this at the share level, you can set it on the client level, and you can even, if you're using things like robocopy, you can actually use a switch to say that you want to compress the traffic as it's going. I had a little bit of a chuckle at that one, but there we go. I can't hear you laughing, which is a little bit sad.
I enjoyed that one myself. The get push. I'm gonna start. My kid's a little bit too old for me to be pushing him on the swing anymore. But if I had one that age, I'd start doing that.
Yeah. Now you're making me feel really old. Mine is 31, so I'm not going to be pushing her on any swings for a while, I think. Anyway, we move over to addition changes and licensing, because I can see a few questions in the thing floating past here. So we have Windows Server 2022 standard as we've had in the past. There is an essentials, which is limited to 25 users, 50 devices, and one CPU that can have a maximum of 10 cores. However, this is just a pricing thing. It is still exactly the same as Windows Server 2022 standard. Now, if you haven't worked in the SMB space, what I'm about to say doesn't affect you at all. But there used to be a real essential server that had SMB features in it. They were all taken out of Windows Server 2019, so certainly not around in 2022. Then we have the Windows Server 2022 Data Center, which gives you storage replica. There's like a light version in standard, but so storage replica is it's not a new feature. We've had it in 19 and 16, but it gives you replication on the disk level between two servers, and that replication can be over a wide area network. So it's essentially SAN replication built into Windows Server, so you don't have to buy an expensive SAN and then buy the expensive license to have SAN to SAN replication. You can do it all in Windows Server. And then Storage Spaces Direct, which is sharing disks in a cluster to make them appear as a single storage space, is also available only in Data Center. Now, here's that Server 22 Data Center Azure Edition. Now, it adds some interesting features. We've already mentioned SMB over quick. It also does hot patching. So this is a feature that we've had available in Azure for a while. Essentially what this means is that you can install a patch for the operating system, which gets recycled in memory without actually rebooting the machine. Not every a patch can be applied this way, but a lot of them can, which gives you excellent uptime. However, it's only available on server core. If you're running server with a GUI or desktop edition, so you can actually have Windows icons and things, you don't get hot patching. And the last bit, and this one is going to have yearly feature updates, so this is probably where Microsoft is going to spend their time. Now you can then say, well, hang on a second, where can I run this? Because it sounds like you can only run it in Azure, and of course you can run it in Azure, right, as a VM in IaaS in Azure, no problem. You can also run this on Azure Stack HCI, which is where Andy's going to talk more about this. So as I mentioned, there is no real essentials anymore. This is just a pricing feature that it's a little bit cheaper, but you're still only getting Server 2022 standard and no real essentials feature. And Hyper-V Server, Andy's going to talk more about that in a minute, but there is no Hyper-V Server 2022. The last version of that is Hyper-V Server 2019. Now, I want to point out here that Server 2012 and 2012 R2 have the same support expiry on the 10th of October 2023. So we're just shy of 2 years, which goes past very fast in IT. If you migrate those servers into Azure, you've got VMs on premises and you want to migrate, or physical servers, and you want to migrate them into Azure, you can get, just like we can today with 2008 and 2008 R2, you can get extended support and extended patches for those for up to 3 years in Azure for no extra cost. And I'm going to hand over to you, Andy.
Sounds good. You know, I'm seeing a trend here. There's a lot of carrots being given out for moving things to the cloud. I'm just an observation, you know. So, all right. So I'm gonna go ahead and steal presenter view, make myself the presenter, and I'm going to show PowerPoint and show this window. You should see the slide deck, Paul. I'm hoping so.
I am not. I'm waiting to view Andy's screen.
Oh, hold on.
And I think we're in business. I got a gray line. No,
Yeah, hold on. I had a technical difficulty. Here we go. It's showing. Do you see the whole screen?
Now I see the whole screen. I see a green bar over here. That's better.
How about now?
That is much better. Well done.
All right, there we go. You guys probably don't want to see the entire ultra wide. That probably isn't useful. Anyway, so what's up with Hyper-V Server? This is what we're going to talk about next. And yeah, so first off, what I want to talk about as part of this particular bullet point this doesn't mean that Hyper-V is going away. I've seen post after post. I've even seen some news stories from reputable IT news sites that you read the headline and it's like, oh my God, Hyper-V is going away. That's not the case. What we're talking about here is we're talking about the free SKU of Windows Server that just contains what you need to run virtualized workloads. That free SKU has been around for, boy, I think since 2012, I think, right, Paul? Right, Paul, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Yeah, my memory's not that great, but anyway. So yeah, that's what's going away here, and there's been a lot of mixed reaction in the community over this particular decision. And so kind of where we saw some confirmation of this, I've actually linked to a Microsoft communities thread where Eldon Christensen from the Windows Server team was actually very involved in that thread. And where he says here is that, hey, Azure Stack HCI, which I'm going to be talking about in a second, is really the strategic direction for their hypervisor platform. And with that, you look a little bit further down in this post, you can see that, hey, Microsoft Hyper-V Server 2019, again, the free SKU, is that product's last version. So that's kind of what the news is here. So when I think about use cases for Hyper-V Server, the big one that I'm aware of are, hosters or anyone that's hosting up open source workloads. So maybe you want to host up a bunch of Linux virtual machines using Hyper-V. This was a great solution for that because there was no licensing cost for the hypervisor itself, right? So this is kind of like the Microsoft equivalent of VMware's free ESXi hypervisor, right? Kind of the same thing. So this is actually going away. And again, as you can see here, the new strategic direction is Azure Stack HCI. Now, moving forward a little bit more, why is it going away, right? That's the question that I keep seeing again and again in thread after thread and comment section after comment section is why is it going away? And I best I can do here is kind of use my crystal ball, right? I don't know the definitive answer, but I will say that I've been in the Microsoft MVP program for going on 9 years now, and what I've learned in that time is that Microsoft doesn't make these decisions for no reason at all. What I suspect is going on here, and I kind of alluded to that a few minutes ago when I took over the screen share from Paul, is that kind of seeing a trend here with a lot of these features, along with some of the major features being gated behind Windows Server Azure Edition. We're now starting to see more of a concentrated effort, in my opinion, by Microsoft to say, hey, we want you to be using Azure or at least be using hybrid cloud services, right? There's just this real push to hybrid cloud. Microsoft, all of their innovation, all of their development is being heavily focused into cloud and hybrid cloud technologies. Again, we see evidence of that from the fact that you look at core services on Windows servers like AD, DNS. I even got a question a couple weeks ago, what's new in certificate services? There's nothing new in certificate services, right? So you kind of read between the lines, you really see that that's kind of the reason for it. And you pair that also with the fact that the most popular type of workload for virtual machines on top of Microsoft Azure are open source workloads. Again, you kind of see the removal of Hyper-V Server as kind of a little bit more of a forceful nudge to stop using that on-premises platform in favor of something that is at least hybrid cloud focused like Azure Stack HCI. Now, that all said, Hyper-V Server isn't going away anytime soon. You saw on that previous slide where Hyper-V Server 2019 is going to be the final version of that product. It still follows the support lifecycle of Windows Server 2019. So even though it's a free SKU, you can still pay to have a support incident done on it. It's still going to get patches up until January 9th of 2029. So you've got 7-8 years to plan that transition, and the new way forward is Azure Stack HCI, and I'm sure there'll be other options by the time we finally get around to that January 9th, 2029 date. So again, it's not going away anytime soon. Again, this doesn't mean Hyper-V itself is going away. we're going to be talking about a little bit more how important Hyper-V is to Microsoft as a technology a little bit later in this presentation. So what are your alternatives, right? So using this information, what are your alternatives? Well, you can stay on Hyper-V Server 2019, for another 7 or 8 years, right? So that certainly is an option. We've talked about Azure Stack HCI, which I'm going to get a little bit more into here in a second. The free VMware ESXi is also a option if you're still looking for a free hypervisor. Hyper-V is near and dear to my heart, so that certainly is my preference, but I'm also a VMware vExpert, and the ESXi virtualization vCloud vSphere is a highly performant, very mature virtualization solution, so that certainly works as well. And then finally, the use case I gave earlier about a lot of these organizations that are using Hyper-V Server historically do it for open source workloads. The KVM/QEMU hypervisor inside of the Linux kernel it's matured very nicely these last couple of years. So if you've got the expertise in-house to run all these Linux VMs, you probably have the expertise to use KVM and QEMU as well. So certainly look at that as an alternative. So with that, let's talk about Azure Stack HCI. Excuse me. So where does it fit into the entire ecosystem? And this particular image, I meant to put the link here. I'll be sure that gets put in the follow-up blog post. But basically what this image here is from docs.microsoft.com, and it kind of shows you where Azure Stack HCI fits into the entire cloud and hybrid cloud ecosystem. And I remember when I first heard the name Azure Stack HCI and learning what it was, I'm like, oh, there's no way that's not going to confuse people or anything, right? You can sense the sarcasm in my voice. So despite the name, Azure Stack HCI actually lives on premises. So starting on the left-hand side of this particular screen, we've got Microsoft Azure, which is the public cloud that Microsoft builds, supports, and maintains, where you can run compute, storage, networking. You've got all of the various IaaS, PaaS services that are involved in that platform. SQL in Azure is the big one that comes to mind when I think about that, and all of the other bells and whistles that are associated with the public Azure platform, right? Then you've got Azure Stack in the middle, which basically brings the power of public Azure cloud to your data center in a all built, purposed, basically an appliance type of model that it actually bring this half stack or full stack into your data center, plug it up, and you have Azure built into your data center. And then on the right-hand side, we've got Azure Stack HCI, which is historically what you've been doing with your Hyper-V clusters on premises up until today. So all Azure Stack HCI is it's Hyper-V, its storage space is direct, it's software-defined networking, it's all of those technologies that we've been using all along in Windows Server, but it's been packaged up into a nice, easy to use, easy to install process using either hyper-converged systems that are fully vetted and certified by third-party vendors like HP, Dell, Lenovo, or you can utilize the Azure Stack HCI catalog, which again, I'll be sure we get the links to that put in the follow-up blog post as well. You can go into this catalog and you can pick out certified hardware and craft your own solution as well. Now that said, Azure Stack HCI, it's really used for the on-prem virtualized apps. A couple other key things here. As Paul mentioned, you can actually use Azure Stack HCI to run Azure Edition, so that 2022 version, the Azure Edition of Windows Server 2022, to get some of those gated features we talked about. And then here's the sticking point and where a lot of the angst is coming from. So we're moving from what has historically been a free SKU, right? And they're now asking people to move towards Azure Stack HCI, and this is how it's priced. You're priced at $10 per physical core per month. Now, for small organizations, that doesn't seem a lot, but it is more than free, right? Is part of the issue. And out of curiosity, I've roughly known how much Windows Server Data Center has costed over the last decade on and off through all of the iterations and changes. As an exercise, I said, okay, what if I have a a server that has 8 cores in it, and maybe I have a 3-node cluster. So we're talking 24 CPU cores. So that's $240 a month, times 3, basically times 36 months, comes out to, if I remember correctly, about $8,000, which now the math is making sense. It's really starting to feel like a data center license purchase at that point. But we are covering 3 nodes. So again, value is subjective, right? But my whole point here is that's basically how Azure Stack HCI is priced today and moving forward. So with that, what I want to do is I just want to spend a little time kind of going through the management process of Azure Stack HCI, right? And let me move over to RDP. Paul, you should be able to see Windows Admin Center, correct?
I can indeed. I can indeed.
Perfect. All right, so what I've got here, just so you can see, I actually have one giant, I don't remember what series virtual machine living in Azure, but you can see I have one giant virtual machine running in Azure that has nested virtualization enabled, and I'm running a bunch of virtualized Azure Stack HCI nodes here, each with 32 gigs of memory. I've got a domain controller running in this environment, a management VM, and this 2019 VM is used for something else, so we'll ignore that for now. So you can pretend that this is a physical deployment, but this deployment actually lives on a single VM in Azure. So this entire solution, it's a separate ISO you download, you install it, you run through this this installation wizard. It helps you get all the software-defined networking, all the storage configured. Basically, it really does a good job of walking you through the process. It also walks you through patching the servers before you actually try to establish the cluster. I think back to how we've been establishing clusters all of these years, and they've really done a good job of wizardifying it, I guess I would say, taking all of that complexity and getting it down into a couple of screens inside of a wizard. Now, the entire solution is managed using Windows Admin Center, which I've got here. And this is just the dashboard view. So dashboard view, hey, what's the overall highlights of my particular cluster? I've only got 3 virtual machines running on this 3-node cluster. So obviously it's not doing a ton. So you can see CPU usage, memory usage across the entire cluster, storage usage. If you've used Windows Admin Center, this is all very familiar to what you've seen before. Now, if I kind of start stepping through what the cluster looks like, we come down here to servers and inventory. You can see all of my various Azure Stack HCI nodes here. If it was a physical machine, you'd see the model and the serial number, but these are all VMs, again, living in Azure, like I said. And we can drill into these and we can manage these nodes individually if we want. We've got all the typical roles that features and roles that you're used to seeing inside of a failover cluster. So I can drain the roles. I can manage that node specifically if I want. So if I want to do any management task on that node specifically, I can drill down into it and I can see all the various bits and pieces of this particular node in the cluster. And then if I head back to the cluster itself, you'll see a couple of other things are involved here as well. So Azure Kubernetes Service. This is kind of one of the big areas where we're seeing a lot of development. So once you have an Azure Stack HCI cluster up and running, you can actually install AKS on top of your on-prem solution. So historically, this solution has only lived in Microsoft Azure, but you can install it now on top of Azure Stack HCI if you want. And the other thing I like about using Windows Admin Center for this is if you haven't configured a particular feature or function yet, they've got all the relevant links right here in the UI out to the docs articles that you need to start planning that implementation. Now, just a couple of other things to show here. Again, Azure Stack HCI utilizes storage spaces direct under the hood. So if I go here and I actually look, I've got 18 drives that are associated with these 3 nodes. They're all healthy currently. And if I drill into the actual inventory of disks, serial number is all unknown because they're all virtual disks, right? But basically I've got 18 100 gigabyte disks that live in this storage spaces direct cluster. And you can see how the utilization is used across them. And if I drill into volumes, I can see like, okay, how have these disks been carved up and how are they being presented to the cluster. So you can see here I've got 3 different volumes. The cluster performance volume gets created automatically at the time of cluster creation, and I've gone off and I've carved off a volume specifically for ISOs. Old, standalone hypervisor habit of mine, I guess. And then VM storage, which is where the virtual machines in the cluster live. Now, 2 other sections I want to cover really quick before we move on. So virtual switches, like I mentioned, the wizard does a really good job of kind of walking you through the setup process of all that historically complex stuff, like the software-defined networking. So as part of the wizard, it set up this converged switch for me based on the networking cards that are the NICs that were detected during installation. So if I drill into this, I can see, hey, I've got 1 NIC that I'm using for management, and then I've got these 2 other NICs, 10 gig speed, that are paired in a converged switch method. So again, it does all this for you with a couple of basic decisions during the setup process, which is pretty nice. And then the other thing I really like about this management solution is cluster aware updating is baked right into Windows Admin Center. So basically what this will do is it'll go out and see, okay, what updates are available for the nodes in this cluster, and it will actually use cluster aware updating to update the entire cluster for you, drain the roles as it patches each node, and keep everything up and running while it patches all the nodes underneath, which kind of is really a nice feature that you don't have to worry about, draining VMs yourself, manually running patches. It kind of automates the whole process for you, which is nice. And then finally, if you drill into the settings section here, you can see that, hey, we've got a lot of the typical failover clustering settings that we've been dealing with all of these years, right? How the load balancing works, how the cluster witness is set up, enhanced session mode settings, things like that. And also you'll see this Azure Stack HCI registration. So if I go back out to the dashboard, I can actually register this Azure Stack HCI. You're actually required to, for licensing purposes, register it with Azure. And if I drill into view the resource inside of Azure, I can come in here and I can actually see the basic resources as they exist. So here I can say I've got this Azure Stack HCI cluster, and these are the nodes that are associated with it. If I went and actually set up Azure Arc, that's probably another big buzzword that you guys have heard of lately. If I set up Azure Arc, I could even perform management functions directly from the Azure portal against my Azure Stack HCI implementation. So this kind of all goes to show that hybrid cloud is really a destination for Microsoft, not just part of the journey, as I think a lot of people think it is. They really see it as a destination, and there are some people that genuinely need to remain on-premise. This is kind of the best of both worlds, giving you that on-premise option while giving you some of the power and capabilities of the public cloud, right? And then finally, one other thing I wanted to show here, you're going to see an error message or 2 here because my the licensing in my Altaro VM Backup lab has, I just noticed that the licensing had expired this morning, but I just wanted to at least show you the host view inside of our backup application here, that we do fully support backing up Azure Stack HCI clusters. You can see I've got the cluster added here in the host view in Altaro VM Backup, and you just treat them just like they were any other on-premises, Hyper-V host, and we can back up and protect workloads on those clusters. So with that, let me hop back over to the PowerPoint. Should see the PowerPoint again, Paul, right?
Yep, can see it.
Perfect.
Excellent.
What does it all mean? And that's, yep. I really laughed at this one the other day. Paul, you want to walk us through this one? I got a good chuckle out of this, particularly because of the last
talking about changes, right? We're talking about, I can see a few comments of the people in the question area talking about cloud is not really the future, etc., and it's just a money-making machine, etc. The reality is, of course, it is one tool in the tool belt, depending on what your business is, what your regulations are, how agile your business is, etc. Certainly going through some of the changes, right? There will be people who still held on to their mainframe since the 60s, right? There will be people who are going to hold on to the VMware virtual machines till somebody pries it out of their cold dead hands, right? So we go through changes in IT, and I'm not sure that we're all going to hail Alexa goddess of power, but and I'm pretty sure we're not going to end up with Linux on the desktop after we've learned about slide rules, but you know what I mean. It's there.
When I saw Linux on the desktop coming after basically what looks like the Stone Age, like I laughed so hard when I saw that, because
That's a good one.
Ancient history for me, I was a Linux administrator at one point in time, and like, you know, they've been saying this is the year of the Linux desktop every year since probably 1985, and we're still waiting. So anyway.
We move on to the next slide. We've got a few things to talk about here. So the reality is, as Andy covered very eloquently, there is a push to hybrid and cloud. But notice how Microsoft is not saying you got to be in Azure. They're saying, if you want to run on premises, we've got Azure Stack Hub. If you happen to have a lot of money and you get a rack of servers that you can't touch, and then you can run your workloads on there in a totally Azure software-based platform, or you can run Azure Stack HCI. So you can have a managed Kubernetes cluster managed from the cloud for you, updated from the cloud automatically. Fantastic, right? You can be hybrid. You can still be both on premises and take advantage of the cloud-based new features. The secure core server that we covered in the beginning, you got to remember that is just for physical servers, right? So how many physical servers do you actually have in your data center that you're going to buy new physical servers for and run Server 2022 on them? It's a great thing to protect it. Somebody asked in the questions whether you require TPM 2.0. Yes, you do. Now, the other thing that Microsoft made a big deal out of is TLS 1.3. As far as I could find online, it is already in preview in Windows 10, and I cannot imagine that once it is baked and totally ready, that they will not backport it to Server 16 and Server 19, because those servers are still in production. I don't think it'll come to 12 and 12R2, but certainly those things will be there as well. So whilst it's a great new feature, it is not a reason to upgrade. System Center itself, apart from Configuration Manager, which is now part of Endpoint Manager, is now on life support. A few years ago, it used to be that when a new Windows Server version came out, they had to have the System Center version to match coming out at the same time to aid in adoption. Doesn't seem to be quite as important anymore, because System Center 2022 is not coming out until the first half of next year. Now, as Andy covered, Hyper-V is still a huge investment area for Microsoft. All of Azure, the millions of physical servers in Azure that you can run your IaaS VMs on top of, run Hyper-V. So Microsoft is not going to stop investing in Hyper-V. And Windows Server and Hyper-V containers, which is another thing that they talk a lot about in Windows Server 2022, it's a great feature, but the reality is that market share wise, Windows Server containers and Hyper-V containers are mostly used for migrating existing workloads, older applications that you have into a containerized world. They're not really used heavily for writing new applications. Next slide.
Yep, I think one other piece of interesting Hyper-V trivia, one of my favorite piece of Hyper-V trivia is Xbox actually runs Hyper-V as well. Just kind of a interesting piece of trivia for the day.
Absolutely, I totally agree. So don't try to fight the wave. The wave is coming. This isn't just a Microsoft invention. The cloud is happening. Hybrid is happening. It's been happening for years. I get a bonus point for anybody who puts into the question and answer area who made the quote, be the water or be water. Just move along with it. And we talked about the paradigm shifts, right? It's not going to help your business, your clients, or anyone else, and certainly not your career, to desperately hold on to your to the old technology. And hybrid is here to stay for a long time, and it's going to be the new normal for a very, very long time. You can specialize. Bruce Lee, well done, Stuart. Absolutely. Oh, there are several people. There must be a little bit of a delay. Oh yeah, we've got several people coming in from Bruce Lee there. Yeah, that absolutely. You can specialize, right? There are people who are making a good career out of being the Exchange server specialist, because there are still people who run that on premises, and they're going to do that for the foreseeable future. But maybe you're not going to be quite as versatile as somebody who learns about the cloud as well. Obviously, continuously learning is really, really important, makes you a more versatile IT professional. And I can't help it, I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, so I do have to point out that certification gives you a lot of confidence and gives you a more broader view of a product. In that vein, Microsoft has or will release 2 new certifications based on Windows Server 2022. There weren't any for Server 19, they're now coming in Server 2022, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I was just going to mention along those lines, we actually have a new podcast, a Dojo podcast coming here shortly. And one of the episodes, I talked with Mike Bender, who is a author evangelist for Pluralsight. We talked specifically about those 2 new certifications. So be on the lookout for that here sometime in the near future.
Cool. Nice plug.
So I think we've got one more poll here. Let me go ahead and launch that. So, knowing all that, we covered a lot of information there, I know. Which of the following will be your core priority moving forward as an IT professional? So kind of interested to see where everyone's going to land on this, like after we've, basically presented kind of what we see as the all the relevant information moving forward. How do you guys think you're going to tackle this? I kind of thought about basically giving the option to select all that apply, but we changed this to just select your core priority, just to kind of see where we end up. And we'll use this information obviously to fashion content, come up with new blog topics and that type of stuff in the future for you guys to consume. All right, so it's been open for 45 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and close that and share the results really quick. So hybrid management, that's kind of where I figured people would end up. And they're still at 26% holding out on-prem, which makes sense. That's about right. You got those very compliancy driven organizations that may have a requirement to be on-prem, right? So that's that makes sense. All right, so let me hide those results. We got just a couple other slides here. Here's another good one from Forrest, right? Paul, you have any comments on this one you want to share?
Not really. I mean, it really is the ability to study for a certification exam. Lots of people tell me that they're useless, and I respectfully disagree. They are very useful, I think, for a lot of people in the IT industry.
Yep. Agreed. All right, so wrap up in Q&A. If you have not gotten your questions in, be sure to get those into the question form, and we'll probably go a couple of minutes over here just to see if we can address as many of those. We've been trying to get to as many of them as we've been stepping along as we can. So with that in mind, I just want to let you know that I need to update this slide because Hornet Security Threat Monitor is out. It is not coming soon, but it is out. So basically what this tool does, it's a phone app that's available on the Android App Store and the iOS App Store that allows you to basically test the permeability of Exchange Online Protection. So as you know, any SKU that you get with a mailbox from Microsoft 365 has Exchange Online Protection, which has a 99.9% detection rate, or sorry, 99% detection rate, whereas our products have a 99.9% detection rate. So if you're interested in checking that out, go ahead and check out the URL there at the bottom. You will be getting a copy of the slide deck, so don't feel like you have to quick write down the URLs. The other big thing about this tool is there are no MX record changes required, which is that's a huge benefit in my opinion if I put my engineer hat back on. We do have an upgraded version of that called Total Protection, which basically has all the bells and whistles, not just detection, gets you full end-to-end protection. More information on that can be found at the URL at the bottom of the screen. We do have some additional resources. So again, we've got the dojos. So today we've got dojos for backup and DR, VMware, Hyper-V, and MSP. We also have dojos coming in the near future for Microsoft 365, Microsoft Azure. It's getting easier to say what we don't have dojos for than what we do. So if you're interested in checking out some additional content, go to altaro.com/dojo and simply pick your poison. And then this is the resource link that Paul mentioned. Again, you'll get a copy of this slide deck, so don't feel like you have to quick and jot all these down. But a lot of great resources here for you to check out after the presentation today.
And the second one from the bottom, sorry, Andy, just one quick one, go back. The second one from the bottom there talks about the certification exams, and the one at the very bottom talks about the UEFI attacks that it's good to be aware of.
Very good. Yeah, those are good resources. I took a look at the certification one. That's a lot of great information on that particular blog post. I highly recommend you check that out. And then just because Paul is our presenter today, I wanted to plug his ebook that he recently finished for us, his second edition of the Office 365/Microsoft 365 Essential Companion Guide. Great resource here. And disregard the picture. I don't think it's available for download in the download section. Maybe it is. I didn't check that when we logged into the webinar today. But you can certainly grab a copy of that ebook on our website. Great resource if you're managing Microsoft 365 in production today. Now, questions. I think we did a pretty good job of getting to a lot of the questions as we step through. Are there any questions that you see we haven't covered, Paul?
Yeah, there's two questions I want to cover, and one came back here. Somebody else asked the same question. For the essentials, that is listed as just over $500 US. People keep asking whether it's 10 cores, hyper-threaded cores, or 10 logical processors, which would mean 5 cores with hyper-threading. I haven't been able to find an official answer on that. Everybody just talks about 10 cores. Normally, when Microsoft talks about cores, they do not mean hyper-threading. So that would mean 20 cores. If you can find a single CPU, remember it has to be a single physical CPU with 20 cores. Thanks you, Alexander, for the comment about the book. Now, the other one, yes, you will be sent a copy of the slides, Chris. Now, the other question we've had a couple of times, and it's really for you, Andy, is how to obtain the Azure Edition to run on premises on Azure Stack HCI. So in Azure, you just spin it up in there, but how do you get it onto Azure Stack HCI?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we've seen a lot of mention that you'll be able to run it on Azure Stack HCI, and I haven't actually seen the downloaded ISO yet for on-prem myself. I've got a couple of feelers out to some of my contacts within Microsoft, and I'll be sure to include that in the follow-up blog post. That way we all have access to it, because I've been waiting for that myself as well. So
okay,
more to come on that one.
Yes, Henrik, yeah, an Azure Stack HCI cluster has to be able to contact Azure on a regular basis.
Yep, correct. If it does not check in once every 30 days, it will start complaining.
Right. So a couple of other little questions, but we'll answer those in the blog post / video afterwards.
Yep, definitely. Sounds good. We're about 5 minutes over. Hey, Paul, I wanted to say thanks for taking the time and talking to us today. It's been fun doing this with you. I enjoyed it, and looking forward to doing the next one with you.
Yeah, I had fun too.
Yep, and then everybody, we'll let you get back to your day. Really appreciate you stopping by and spending some time with us, and we hope to see you again for a future webinar on, a to be determined topic sometime in the future. Appreciate it, everyone. Have a good day. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here, everyone. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to grab lunch or dinner, or depending on what part of the world you're in. But first, I want to take the chance to welcome you to today's webinar on how to manage Windows Server like a boss with Windows Admin Center. My name is Andy Serwich, and I'm joined by a good buddy of mine today, Eric Siren. How's it going, Eric?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good, good. Well, hey, for the viewers out there that follow the Altaro Hyper-V blog, you may recognize Eric's name. So he's been a long-time blogger with us. He's written some absolutely fantastic articles out there. If you're interested in the Hyper-V networking stack, that's one of my particular favorites of his that I like to peruse once in a while. But it's great to have him on for a webinar here, and now you can put a name to the face. So we're really happy to have him here with us today to talk about Windows Admin Center. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our agenda for the day. So first off, we're going to do some introductions of myself and Eric and the topic and the sponsor of today's webinar, Altaro Software. And then we're going to get into really the question of what is Windows Admin Center. Really kind of do some basics there just so everybody has an idea of what Windows Admin Center is, what it can do, what the use case is. And then we're going to talk about how to manage standalone Windows servers, how to manage Hyper-V and failover clusters. And then we're going to get into some S2D stuff, some storage spaces direct, so how to manage storage and storage spaces direct clusters, and finally how to utilize extensions. So one of my personal favorite things about Windows Admin Center is that it is extensible, in that you can install additional software extensions to add more functionality and features into Admin Center. So we're going to be demoing that a little bit later today, and it should be a fun one. And then finally, we'll get into some wrap up and Q&A. So real quick thing about the Q&A. We often don't have enough time to address every single question here live. As you have your questions throughout the webinar, be sure to put them into the questions form. If we can easily address it as we're going through the material at that time, we will. Otherwise, we'll wait until the Q&A section at the end of today's webinar. Now, again, like I said, we have a tough time getting through all the questions we have on these webinars, so we always do a follow-up blog post that contains a full list of all the questions and their associated answers as well. So if you ask a question today that doesn't get an answer, be on the lookout for a follow-up blog post that contains your question and the answer as well. So let's do some introductions. So again, my name is Andy Serwich. I'm a technical evangelist with Altaro Software, and I'm also a Microsoft MVP in the Cloud and Data Center Management competency and a VMware vExpert as well. So I've been in the industry for 16 plus years now. Really the only difference is between when I started now is I have a few less hairs and a little bit more on my gut to carry around. So historically, I've always been focused on the Windows server stack and VMware and infrastructure specifically, but more recently, I've started focusing on cloud, Azure specifically, and containerization technologies like Docker, Kubernetes, and things like that. I'm quite active on Twitter if you want to reach out to me at @aserwich. And I'm also quite active out on all of Altaro's blogs, so altaro.com/Hyper-V, VMware, and MSP Dojo for each of those blogs. And I'll hand it over to Eric to do his introduction. Take it away, my friend.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Siren. Like Andy, I'm an MVP, also in the Cloud and Data Center Management category. I am also a certified technical trainer. So in the past, I was a Microsoft certified trainer and delivered in-person curriculum. I have surpassed the 20-year mark and decided that's enough. I'm not going to count anymore, and someday I'll just retire because I'm hedging on that line between experienced and just plain old. I've done a lot of work with small and medium businesses, and you can see some of the verticals, but what I try to focus on is, I know what that's like to be in a small business where you pay the most per seat, but you get the least amount of attention. So I'm in here because I see you and I want to help you. My particular expertise stack, Hyper-V, Windows Server, and I'm okay at PowerShell. That's something I enjoy doing and like helping out on. Down below, you can see my contact information. Feel free to follow me and connect.
Just okay, PowerShell, huh? Just okay.
Well, when you sit in a room with people like Jeff Hicks, yeah, I'm okay.
Okay, fair enough. I'm in that category too then. Yeah. All right, thanks, Eric. Real quick word about the sponsor of today's webinar, Altaro Software. So we're a fast-growing developer of pretty fantastic, easy-to-use backup software designed for end users and MSPs. That virtual backup solution is Altaro VM Backup. It's trusted by 40,000 plus customers, 9,000 plus partners, and 1,000 plus MSPs worldwide. If you want a little bit more information on that product, go to altaro.com/VM-backup for more information, or go to altaro.com/MSP if you want information specifically on the MSP program we offer. So with that, I think we're going to get into what you're actually here to hear about today, and that is Windows Admin Center. So the first thing I want to start with was, what is Windows Admin Center? Let's kind of address that particular question. That way we're all generally in the same place as far as the rest of today's content goes. So first off, again, what is Windows Admin Center? Really what it comes down to is it's the next generation management tool for IT pros. So you think about how we've managed servers for the last 19, 20 years really, since Windows 2000. We've been using MMC, right? And all of its associated snap-ins. And while that tool has been fantastic, it's worked really well for us over the years. It's not really all that different than it was when it first came out. And management of infrastructure, today and in the future is going more and more the web-based route. So Windows Admin Center is a web-based tool that runs nearly everywhere. You can install it on the server and run it there, connect to it remotely from an endpoint. You can install it directly on a workstation and run it from there. I mean, it runs literally everywhere. In my particular demos, I'm actually running it on my Windows 10 machine. Eric, I think you're actually running it off of a server, correct? For your demos?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So between the two, between the demos, between Eric and I today, you're going to see it running in multiple locations, and you'll find that there's really no difference. It's pretty much the same. I mentioned earlier my favorite thing about Windows Admin Center is its extensibility. So we have a demo, I think it's our last demo of the webinar, where I'm going to install an extension that I've never used myself, and we'll see how it goes. So it'll be fun to see that, and we'll go from there. Additionally, we're going to be, talking about how Windows Admin Center complements existing tools. So I guess one thing I want to point out about that now is that I've mentioned MMC already. The thing that we've heard from Microsoft is that MMC is not going away. And personally, I don't see it going away anytime soon. Maybe 3 to 5 years, that answer might be different. But the way it stands today is that MMC is going to continue to be supported and present, but all of the new development is going to happen in Windows Admin Center. So don't panic. Your legacy tools aren't going away. They're still going to be around and usable. It's just all the new stuff is going to be in Admin Center. A couple other things that you'll see during the demos today is, various pieces of integration with Azure. So you'll see Azure mentioned throughout the UI. That's part of Microsoft's hybrid cloud strategy, in that they're trying to make it as easy as possible to leverage the public cloud where it makes sense for on-premises infrastructure. And if you're interested in downloading Windows Admin Center, I got the download link down there at the bottom right-hand corner. I also have it on this next slide as well, when we're talking about the various versions of Windows Admin Center. So the current stable release is 1809.5, was it, Eric? I think is the current stable release.
1809.5.1.
5.1. Okay, I almost had it.
I'm just being picky.
No worries. But yeah, if you want to download the stable release, it's aka.ms/WAC download. That'll get you to the, like I said, the stable release, and that's the most stable and currently supported build. But there's also an insider preview, and the insider preview gives you newer features, gives you more features, but that also brings a lot of breakage with it too. So all the demos that you're going to see today are using the 1903 insider preview release. So you're probably going to see some bugs. We ran into a bug with one of my demos a little bit earlier. We did another session earlier today. Hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers, it worked just before this session. So hopefully it'll work just fine this afternoon. If you want to download the insider preview, I've got the link down there at the bottom of the screen. It's the same web page where you download the insider preview of Windows Server. It's just you have to scroll all the way down, like you see in the picture here, to additional downloads, and select Windows Admin Center Preview 1903 in the drop-down. So from there, I think we're over to you, Eric. So let me go ahead and make you a presenter. You should have control now, my friend. And you're going to talk to us about managing standalone Windows servers.
That's the plan. Can you all see me?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. Well, look at me. I'm several slides behind. Here we go. Okay. So normally we would talk about installing. I'm going to skip that. I just want to kind of call one thing out. This particular screen during the installer asks you to pick a certificate. You have to use a certificate. You don't have a choice on that. It will offer to generate a self-signed certificate, or you can go hunt down a thumbprint for a certificate locally installed. That can be a bit of a chore. So what I would say is okay to do is pick the self-signed certificate to start off with. Only use it for initial setup. As I've been kind of talking with Andy, I believe my crusade this year is going to be to get people off of self-signed certificates. They're not secure. They're just not a good thing. They should be used for development and not even test, I would argue. and it'll expire in 60 days, so your clock is ticking. But the bigger deal is that it's a security risk. It's impossible to verify that who owns a self-signed certificate. So when you log into your Windows Admin Center and it hands you that, then you're saying, okay, I'm going to just trust that you are who you say you are. Now I'm going to hand over the credentials to every single Windows server that I have. It's a good idea to know who you're giving those credentials over to. So you can go ahead and pick it this way and then continue. And after that, come back later, right? Once you get your certificate set up. If you don't have a certification authority, if your PKI is not configured, we did write an article on that a little while ago. On my final run through, all I had was a Windows server and a WSL installation, and my last walkthrough on that took me 8 minutes to set up. If you have to start from scratch, I would say you could probably do it in 30 minutes to an hour. So it's really not hard to do, and you don't need a lot to get it done. Once you have a PKI, whether you go with a publicly provided one from a commercial vendor, or if you make your own, you issue it to the system running Windows Admin Center Gateway. If you've installed a self-signed certificate, then you can come back, and I've made this tool that you can see on your screen here. You just pick it, hit OK, and you're done. I did notice that it doesn't work with 1903, so I have an opened issue on that. I'm going to get that fixed. I'll get that taken care of for you. But it does work OK on 1809. The second part about Windows Admin Center to be aware of is you want to enable delegation and try to have all your machines in the same domain. If you don't, you're going to get a lot of login prompts, and it's going to get frustrating. I can kind of tell you it's unpleasant. On the official Microsoft documentation, they show a script to use. I've kind of wrapped that up in one you can see here, the link to it. Makes it a little bit easier to run, but however you do it, you'll be glad that you did. You're still going to get more credential prompts than you want, but it will get better. And each new iteration of Windows Admin Center, it continues to get better. So I think that's going to improve. So let's stop talking and let's start showing. This is the way I've configured my Windows Admin Center. You are looking at 1903, which Andy mentioned is in public preview. There are a few little issues with it, but you know it's coming along nicely. So let's start with one of the commonly requested features. Over here to personalization and set dark mode. I know that's a big ask. It's hard on my eyes because the contrast is so low, but you know, if you like it, there it is. I got it.
Priorities, right?
Priorities. Then of course, adding servers to it has gotten better in 1903. Traditionally, we'd come in servers, and hope that goes quickly, and you could just type in a machine. So I'm going to start with one I don't have added. You can see it kind of hunting and thinking about it, and oh, I named it wrong, so it didn't find it, but notice it will let me add it anyway. I think that should go a little bit better. So now it doesn't like my credentials, and notice it's complaining about delegation. I have set up delegation on this one. I think it may be complaining because it's turned off. So I can go ahead and add with credentials, which means I would pick this, or I can just simply hit add and then deal with the problem later. And that's what you would do for, say, a work group join machine. So you can see it here. But the new feature in 1903, servers, drag over here to search Active Directory. You can put in the full name if you want, or you can do a wildcard search. Hit search, and there's all three of my domain controllers. And I can add them all at the same time. Just like that.
Did you want to mention the list bug that you ran into, Eric, with the Excel document?
Oh, yes, let's do that. In the server list, when you go over to import, this in the previous versions was simple text files, all it would take. Now it'll take these multiple types. I tried really hard to get the XL import to work, and it's bad. Don't do it. Unfortunately, I didn't make a demo for this particular webinar, but when you import it, it just reads the Excel file verbatim, and so it's all these special characters and things that it can't process. And then just because I wanted to see what happened, I went ahead and let it add them, and it put them all in the list with these really bizarre characters that didn't mean anything, and then I couldn't get them out. I had to wipe out my Windows Admin Center installation to get rid of them. So not quite there yet. Still working on some things. So, but the text file and the CSV, which is basically either one server per line or a comma separated list, those work just fine. They're okay. So let's jump on to my domain controller here. So you'll notice A lot of things in Windows Admin Center can be very slow. This connecting box is going to take a while. So, Andy, if you have any good questions that came up while we wait.
I did see a question or two here. Yeah. So I got one person that's got an older version installed without a certificate. It's now been upgraded to the newer version. Can they add the certificate now? Personally, I don't see why not.
Yeah, I would. Again, it comes back to you want to verify the identity of the machine. And if you install in gateway mode, or not gateway, the local Windows desktop mode, that's not a problem there either, because you're not going to connect to it remotely, so you know where you're running it.
Yep.
So, okay, so let me switch over here. We're finally connected. Things will feel slower here, but one thing I noticed, for instance, the event viewer tends to be much faster than connecting remotely through MMC. It's noticeably faster. I don't know if anyone else has the same experiences that I do, but it tends to take that a while to come up. You have the export, you can clear your log, and you can filter it, although the filter is not as good as it is in the MMC. So if you're into XML path queries, you're going to have to do MMC still for that, at least for now. But it works well enough for most people, I would say. I wanted to highlight the roles and features options here. So compare this to the server manager view of the same thing. I don't believe this is quite as clear. It's not as obvious where the lines are. So we are looking at one segment for roles, which now that I highlighted is pretty obvious, but without that, it just looks like there's a list in your face. You can collapse it. And then the second thing to compare it to, like you were accustomed to, oh, I see a checkbox. That means it's installed, or an empty box, which means it isn't. Well, not here. This means I check it because I want to then come up here and install it or remove it, as the case may be. So do keep that in mind, things of that nature. And for the last part of this, this is a 2016 machine I'm connected to. I don't know if we brought that up yet, but you can manage any server version back to 2008 R2, but each older version, you progressively lose features until you get just the minimal sort of support. So I want to go to a 2019 system. Show you a new feature that I'm excited to have. Way down here.
While that loads, one other thing worth mentioning is the storage migration service. I always like to bring that up in these conversations. That feature actually supports 2003 because they want people getting off of 2003. So
right.
It's not supported for anything else, but for the storage migration feature in WAC, 2003
yes.
supported.
And I have not yet put this to use because I don't have anything that old, so you can say I get the great big install button. It's like, hey, I would love to try this out, but I haven't touched it yet.
Yep.
What I want to show off is system insights. You do have to have a 2019 server. Unfortunately, it doesn't work with your older ones, but this gives you forecasting. So I know a lot of you guys out there in the small businesses especially, you always have salespeople coming in like, well, you got to get on 10 gigabyte. You got to do it right now. You can pop in here and show them this and say, well, why? What am I doing here that shows you that I need 10 gigabit, excuse me. So not that I'm opposed to 10 gigabit, but it's tell me right here, my network usage is forecasted to remain within the available capacity. I don't need to do anything. So this is a really slick feature. And you get it for CPU, networking, storage, which doesn't quite work because this is a cluster member, and then your volume usage, so your local. Kind of get these charts. Now this one is still building because I keep tearing my Windows Admin Center down and rebuilding it, so I don't have a good amount of historical data yet, but it will help you as you get some history on it.
Hey Eric, real quick, we got one question here. I've got a user trying to look at System Insight on their system right now, and they don't see it. It's only for 2019 servers.
It's only for 2019 servers. That's correct. Only.
Yep.
And I believe I don't know. Is it in 1809? My 1809 is not up. It came along later. It was not one of the original.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And you have to install it, and so that part I'll wait for you when you get to your showing people how to install things. So there's a couple things to get through before you get there. Somebody said it is an 1809.
Yep, I see that.
So you just have to have a 2019 system, and it will work for you.
Yep.
Okay, so we're gonna shift gears just a tiny bit. We want to talk about Hyper-V and the failover clusters. First thing on the Hyper-V box, it does depend on the PowerShell module to be installed locally on the Hyper-V machine, not on Windows Admin Center machine, but on your Hyper-V box. If you haven't done that, you can use Windows Admin Center to do it, because the only thing it cares about is I can't control Hyper-V until I have the module, but everything else, including rules and features, works just fine. I didn't have a lot to talk about there. We're just going to start doing it. So let's do it from the cluster, since we're talking about clusters now. I don't know if we talked, but you can sort your list so you only see clusters if you like. So I want to pare it down to that and then click on it. Wait for it to populate. I get some minor details on my cluster. Andy mentioned in one of our private conversations, you can look at your old validation reports. That's kind of nice, just to be able to pop that in and not go digging through the log files for it. And I want to look at virtual machines. So here, it's going to, when it pops up, it's going to show us only the items that are clustered. So I've got some, like for instance, my domain controllers they are on cluster nodes, but they are not clustered. They are on an internal storage only, so they will not appear. You get your status, your sort of a heads up display, and something I really enjoy, the CPU and memory both. It's dividing up. This is what the host is using. This is what the guest is using at a glance. There's no digging around or let me parse through my metrics logs here. It's just, there it is right there. Then switch over to the inventory and it shows my virtual machines. Again, you only see my clustered, so it's a little bit shorter. And if you want, you can create a new one. And this is where I get a little bit upset, is if you look here, the path, this is where it's going to put it, no problem, because I have a cluster shared volume available. I tend to do everything on SMB3 storage, so I literally had to create a CSV just for this demo. Otherwise, I can't create a virtual machine because everything I use is SMB3. So that I'm not a big fan of, but look right here. You can create a brand new virtual machine with nested virtualization enabled. Right there in the GUI. So this is where we can see that Windows Admin Center is going to evolve away from the MMC, kind of draws a line. This is what we did. WAC is this is what we're doing. So these kind of future things are coming.
Did you want to point out the
I did. Yep.
bug that we ran into yesterday? I think it's worth mentioning that. That way people at least know.
It is, yeah. So Andy caught this. I didn't. This was a great one. So when you come in, you click Add Desk, and then you're shown this is how I want to install it. So if you say I want to install from ISO, and if you give it an ISO that has the ISO extension capitalized, it will throw it out as that's not an ISO. I'm just gonna off the cuff here assume that's a JavaScript thing and just something, a little minor bug, but we're in preview and we're going to be forgiving. But if that happens to you, just rename the file so the ISO extension is lowercase.
Yeah, that was an interesting one to figure out. It's like, right, wait, not a valid ISO, but it is.
I got it right for Microsoft. How can it not be valid? You can do a migration. So let's pick one here. This is my guy to move. Go more and move, and it's going to pick. It's going to decide: do I want to do a live migration or do I want to do a quick migration? You know, Failover Cluster Manager doesn't give you that option. You have to tell it which one you want. Here, it will decide on its own. You can tell me if you think that's good or bad. I'm personally okay with it. And then up here on the right, you can say, hey, I sent the message. And we're going to see how this demo goes. I know sometimes this will simply hang at a percentage and say, oh, I'm working on it. And 3 hours later, you come back and I'm working on it. But if you pull in the console, you say, well, it's been done for 20 minutes. It kind of looks like this one may not go through, or it might. But this is usually just display issues.
We can give that a minute or two here, Eric. And we got a question here that I think is kind of relevant in this discussion about managing VMs. Got a question here about, will this be replacing VMM, Virtual Machine Manager? And
it will not. That is
a.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, bud.
No, you're fine. Go for it.
So no, it's not going to replace VMM. And this question has been asked to the several. I'm not sure exactly how I've seen it filter a few times. And what comes down to is what you see on the screen is basically how they want Windows Admin Center to look. Whereas if you open up VMM, you get a completely different view. You can see the status of multiple virtual machines across multiple clusters all at the same time. You can select a bunch of them and say, hey, upgrade the VMM components. Those things are not going to happen here. It is designed around the idea of one machine at a time.
Yep, correct. So yeah, I expect VMM is going to be around for quite a while yet.
Yes. So yeah, that still says it's moving, and I'm going to bet it's probably lying. I think it's already moved. So let's talk also the SMB3 thing I mentioned before. Let's go in here and look. I believe this is going to error as soon as I open it, or shortly thereafter, assuming it opens. We have another question while we wait. We can
Yeah,
take.
definitely. I've got another one here where kind of a use case question. So you install WAC on one server, and you can then connect to other servers and desktops from Windows 10, 1709 upwards without any agent or client software on the other machines. That is correct. You can absolutely do that. Under the hood, this is all using PowerShell.
Well, it uses also the larger than just PowerShell, uses the Windows
Right.
Management Framework, so you do have
Yep.
to upgrade that to version 5.1. I think somebody else was talking about that earlier.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. Good differentiation.
So here, yeah, it's probably not going to load that because that sits on SMB3 storage. It didn't error this time, which in the past I was getting errors. It's like, I don't even know what to do with this. So I suspect the issues with SMB3 come down to this is, again, the passing credentials around from computer to computer to computer. And after a while, it's like, this is a security risk. I don't want to do that. So I imagine they're still working through some of those concerns. Okay, and one more thing I really want you to see here. I need to switch to an individual node because the virtual machine I want to show you only runs here. So you're going to see a different list, even though it's a node in the same cluster that I just showed you. We're going to get a different inventory. So this one right here, this is my Linux machine that I use to monitor all my other machines. So I come under here to more, and I get two options. I get connect and download RDP file. Now the nice thing about both of these is these are a VM Connect session that run independently. You're not RDPing directly to the machine. So I've already downloaded that one, so I can edit it and fix it. I'm logging in to the Hyper-V host right now. That's what it's asking me for. And here, there's my Linux machine running in an RDP session that I don't think I've made this clear enough in the past, so let's really reiterate. I don't have to open anything at all on that machine for this to work. I'm not connected in on SSH. I have nothing at all connected. I'm talking only to the Hyper-V host. And the cool thing about that is it is completely 100% out of band. So you're watching me. I'm going to reboot this machine. I'm not going to lose connection to it or anything. Everything is just fine. And
RDP to a Linux machine.
To a Linux machine, sort of. I'm not RDP to it. I'm
Right.
RDP to the host, and then
Right.
VM bus connects to it.
Yep.
So you can do this to set up a machine, whatever. And of course, now I'm showing off Linux because I think that's the part people are like, really, that works? And this also works on your Hyper-V virtual, or sorry, your Windows-based virtual machines as well. It doesn't have to be Linux. It can be anybody. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to you, Andy.
Sounds good. Let me go ahead and grab presenter here. All right. Should be able to see my screen again. Can you see that, Eric?
I can see you. I can see you moving.
Okay. So you do see the screen. Good.
Yes.
All right. And I got to switch presenter view here. Okay. So thus far, we've talked about failover clusters, Hyper-V, and standalone servers. So now I want to take a step back and kind of talk about the third use case for Windows Admin Center here, and that is centered around Storage Spaces Direct. And if you've used Storage Spaces Direct, or you've talked about it, or if you've read about it, if you've read about it in the past, you'll know that the management story around S2D or storage spaces direct has always kind of been a little bit up in the air. Historically, you've always had to manage it pretty much strictly through PowerShell, which a lot of administrators, they don't like to do that. They at least want some sort of GUI to use in your day-to-day administration. And now with Windows Admin Center, we have that. So Windows Admin Center has this hyper-converged cluster manager section that's designed specifically to manage S2D clusters. And it comes with a couple of caveats here. I'm going to show it to you in just a second, but I want to talk about a few points here first. So the installation of S2D is still done with PowerShell. You still have to set up your nodes, you still have to configure your cluster like you historically would, and then you have to go in and use the PowerShell commands to enable S2D and all of that good stuff. Not all management functions are in the UI yet. So there's still some things that you have to go to PowerShell for. So like, for example, if some sort of storage repair job is running, you still have to go and issue a get storage job on one of the nodes to see, hey, is there a storage repair happening or something like that. There is some bugginess during setup of the management pieces inside of Windows Admin Center for this, mainly due to the fact that my my S2D cluster here that I'm using for the demo today is actually a 2016 S2D cluster, and Windows Admin Center came out after 2016 did. And basically the nice thing about it is, even though it was a bug, it told me exactly what I needed to do to get it working. So it'll say, hey, because WAC came out after 2016, you need to go install this particular KB, make sure it's there and installed on your nodes, and then you need to go issue this string on any node in the cluster. It really did a good job of letting me know exactly what I needed to do to get it working. So with all that said, with those caveats said, there are a load of useful features here. And really, it's, in my opinion, it takes S2D from being, your enthusiast hyper-converged infrastructure solution to more of a mainstream, in my opinion. A little bit more ready for prime time. So let's actually take a look at it. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my instance of Windows Admin Center. Now, like you saw with Eric's session or with his demos earlier, he was running it off of a he was running Windows Admin Center off of a Windows server. He was connecting remotely to it. I've actually got Windows Admin Center running on my local Windows 10 machine. So when you run it locally on Windows 10, you'll actually get the system tray icon down here to let you know that, hey, Windows Admin Center is working. And you can see that I'm just attached to localhost on port 6516. So here I've come down into the hyper-converged cluster manager section. Here's my S2D cluster, type hyper-converged cluster. And again, for those that aren't aware, HCI or hyper-converged infrastructure is just the concept of there being compute and storage contained within the same chassis. So in my particular case here, I have a 2-node S2D cluster. Each node in the cluster has Hyper-V installed on them and storage spaces direct installed on them. The storage is striped across the 2 nodes. That way I can tolerate one host failure and still have everything up and running. So that's the whole gist of HCI. So on this particular dashboard, you'll notice a couple of different things compared to like the failover clustering dashboard that Eric showed you earlier. And that is, you've got a couple of different pieces of information. So yeah, we've got the typical CPU memory usage. But we also have these storage metrics too. I've got all of my drives healthy. I've got 10 total drives across these 2 nodes. I've got 1 volume set up, 2 VMs, 1 running, 1 powered off. And because we're talking about, hyper-converged infrastructure, storage is really, really important. You can see down here, you've got some cluster performance metrics, specifically probably your most important ones for a cluster like this, and that is IOPS and latency. Now this particular cluster for this demo is completely virtualized. It's not really doing a whole lot, so obviously there's not a whole lot going on right now. And now I want to just kind of step through a couple of different sections here so you kind of get a feel for how things are different and what to specifically look for in an HCI management instance here in WAC. So if I come in here to the summary view, and I think Eric pointed this out a little bit earlier, we have a very similar view here based on like what he showed earlier. I really like, and I'm going to reiterate this a little bit, is the fact that I can see how much CPU and memory the host is consuming, compared with how much CPU and memory the guest VMs are consuming. Huge time saver for me. I really like seeing that. The other nice thing here is I've got all the various events that have to do with the cluster here as well. So you can see 13 hours ago, the VMM service completed a live migration. Also 13 hours ago, I had an issue with the memory balancer. So you can actually kind of step through and see all the various events that have to do with this cluster. Now, kind of like what Eric showed you earlier, I have an inventory of virtual machines as well. For this particular demo, I'm going to drill down into this virtual machine. Eric showed you the RDP option. I'm just going to show you the option for actually connecting to the virtual machine inside of a browser. Now, let's all cross our fingers because this is the one that didn't work for me this morning. When I click connect this, okay, it's going to work this time. So when I click connect this morning, it just did nothing. No error messages. It just did nothing, which is actually more maddening, but it's actually going to work this time. So let me authenticate. And you can see it's a very, very basic console. So this virtual machine is actually running Windows Server Core 2016, I believe. So I can run sconfig and I can manage and utilize this virtual machine just like I would any other virtual machine. You do have some other basic functions here. I can issue a send, control, alt, delete. I can copy from a remote clipboard, so I can cut and paste things in and out of the virtual machine. But it's a very basic, simple way to get at a virtual machine without having to do a whole lot else other than use just Windows Admin Center.
If I can interject a little bit there, you notice up there it said basic session.
Yeah.
So I don't have enhanced session enabled anywhere. So I wonder if we had enabled session, if we would have had a completely different experience.
That's a good point. That's a good point. It's very rare I used enhanced session mode myself because, once the VM's up, I'm usually just RDPing into it. But that's a good point. I'll have to try that out. A couple of other sections here. You can control and create virtual switches here. So you see I've got 2 virtual switches, basically the same thing on both nodes. Very easy to set up and install new switches, external, and it'll load a list of your various network adapters on the host that you have selected. I mean, very much what you're used to using inside of Hyper-V Manager. The reason there's no eligible adapters right now is because all the NICs on that particular host are currently used, so there's none to show. One thing that I always like to point out with this, and it's worth showing, when you're using the legacy tools like Cluster Manager, it refers to a physical or any server that's part of the cluster as a node. Windows Admin Center does not. I found that very interesting. It refers to them as servers. So that's just one important thing to keep in mind as you're using the tool here. And kind of the same thing as Cluster Manager, I can go to inventory, I can get a list, what's the make and model. Again, these are virtual machines. Serial numbers, that type of thing. And then let's get to the storage section here. So again, this is a hyper-converged cluster deployment. So we've got storage involved here as well. So I've got 1 volume, and again, it's currently a 2-way mirror. So this is a 2-node cluster. I don't have any other options with Storage Spaces Direct. I have to use a mirror with a 2-node cluster. With more nodes, you have a little bit more flexibility for what kind of resiliency you want to set up for the cluster storage. The other thing worth noting here is that it automatically will do a CSV file system, so no SMB3 in this particular case. If you want to look at the specific drives that are associated with that volume, you can come down to drives and look at your inventory. This is where you could actually come in here and say, oh, maybe I have a failed drive, turn the light on or off if your hardware supports that. Again, virtualized in this case, so obviously we can't do that. But this is a good place to check out the health of your various disks. And then a couple of other things I wanna show you. If you go to updates here, cluster aware updating is actually baked into Windows Admin Center. So if I authenticate here really quick, there's not going to be much to show because I don't have it set up to do this, but it should give me just a button and a short description here on, basically, hey, do you want us to enable cluster aware updating on this cluster? And what that allows the cluster to do, what it allows Windows Admin Center to do here is manage Windows updates, but do it in a way that only takes one cluster node down at a time to make sure that the VMs running on this cluster stay online and available at all times. So really a nice, easy time saver. It saves a lot of headaches as far as, you know, update management goes. And then finally, the diagnostics section here. So diagnostics, it's an extension that you have to install. I don't have it installed in this particular instance, but you'll be able to see here that you can collect some performance metrics, some troubleshooting metrics. And the other thing I like to point out here is that when you call Microsoft for support for an S2D cluster, chances are they're going to ask you to go and run this and pull the information and send it to them. You know, it really reminds me of doing a support case with VMware, and that, hey, send me your VM logs, or I forget the actual name of the log, but they did the similar thing. You go into the vSphere client, you'd say produce logs. That's what it reminds me of, and it seems very similar in this case. So speaking of extensions, that's what I actually have up next to talk about. Let me swap that back around really quick. And utilizing extensions. Again, my particular favorite thing when it comes to Windows Admin Center is the extensibility. They're really easy to install. I'm going to show you here in a second how to install them. And it's not just for Microsoft tools either. I know the picture on the left-hand side of the slide is really small, but if you look close, you'll see that there's a number of third-party vendors like Fujitsu, Lenovo, Squared Up, Data On. They all have third-party extensions that you can just go and select it and click install, and it installs it into Windows Admin Center. The nice thing about this is that many vendors are starting to create add-ons for this. That way, their management, you know, their management infrastructure is rolled into Windows Admin Center. That way, the IT administrator really has, you know, that single pane of glass that, you know, all of us are striving for, right? And the other thing from a security perspective is if you're in an industry with high security like defense or banking or healthcare or something like that, you do have the ability to add your own extension repository. So if you want to control what extensions can get installed into Windows Admin Center, it's possible to do that. So let's head back to our demo really quick. And I'm going to go up here into the settings section and go to extensions. Now, I asked Eric the other day if this was a crazy idea, but basically what we're going to do is I'm going to install an extension that I've never used myself. But the point of this demo is to just show you how easy it is to find an extension that you want to use, install it, and then start using it. So for our session earlier this morning, we actually installed the Active Directory preview extension. Which it actually worked out. But which one did we want to do this time, Eric? I think we talked about doing DNS, didn't we?
Yes, DNS, please.
DNS. You want to see DNS? All right.
I want to see DNS.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and install this DNS preview extension to allow us to manage DNS at some level. Now, admittedly, I don't know what level it's going to allow us to manage DNS, but we're going to find out. But you can see it's actually installing the extension, and after it's done installing the extension, it refreshes Admin Center for me. So now we can see, oh, it's not in a list anymore. And if I go over to installed extensions, I can see that the preview extension is there. Now, the other nice thing that I like about Admin Center that I forgot to mention on the slide I showed you a second ago was it's fairly good about letting you know when an extension has an update available. And it will usually poke you to say, hey, there's an update available for one of your extensions. Click here to check it out. So it does a fairly good job about that. So I'm going to assume that I need to connect to one of my DNS servers directly in order to use this. So we'll go to one of my domain controllers here. And my guess is down at the bottom in the left-hand column, there's going to be a DNS section added. So we'll give that a second to connect here. Howdy, have you seen any good questions come through, Eric, that you want to address really quick?
I am kind of tackling them out of band. There are a couple MSP related questions you may want to jump on.
Yeah, okay.
See if I can grab one out here. Can you use WAC to manage Exchange Online protection?
Exchange
I don't know
Online.
the answer to that one.
I don't know for sure either. I don't believe you can, but don't quote me on that.
Right, the Azure connections continue rolling in. We keep getting new things that connect us to Azure, and we can almost make another webinar out of that. There's so many.
Yeah, just about. Yeah, I've not seen anything about Exchange Online Protection. I could be at some point they'll add that. Again with this whole extensibility idea. But today I don't think it's possible, not with anything that I've seen so far. With that, let's take a look at this. So the extension is available and it's down here in the extensions section on the left-hand pane. So the DNS PowerShell tools are not installed. So it's giving me the option to install them. So I guess we'll see here. So it's actually executing. I'm sure in the background it's just doing a PowerShell install module in the background. I did see a question earlier that I want to mention really quick is, can you see what PowerShell commands are happening with these associated, GUI functions that we're doing? You got this PowerShell button up here in the right-hand column. I don't know if it'll show anything. Okay, so it will. So here you can actually see what PowerShell scripts are relevant for the particular section of the UI you're in. So I want to make sure I address that first chance I got. So you'll see that button available in most sections of the UI here. So we're still installing the RSAT tools here. Oh, there we go. Okay, it's working. Getting excited. I like it when things work. Maybe. So we got our forward lookup zones and reverse lookup zones. And again, I've never used this particular extension before. Okay, so we can see my local domain here. And hey, look at that. I got a list of records too. So this is handy. This is fairly new and we haven't been able to do this before. So I know this and AD were specifically very popular asks for Windows Admin Center. So it's good to see that they're starting to go through and address some of those requests. So very cool. So again, that demo was to just show you how easy it was to install an extension and extend the functionality of Windows Admin Center. Very simple, very easy to use. So let's head back to our slide deck and we'll wrap things up. So with that, I want to share just a couple of slides with you about some different pieces of information here. This also gives you kind of a little time to go ahead and get your final questions added into the question form. Again, if we can't get to it today, we'll be sure to get your question answered in a follow-up blog post as well. So one thing I want to mention here, we've got a new ebook out there that Eric himself wrote for us. So this is a fantastic new ebook on this very same topic, but it does a really good job of digging a little bit deeper into some of the stuff that we didn't talk about on this particular webinar. Eric, did you want to talk about the ebook for a second?
Mostly just think of it as kind of the opposite of the webinar. I spent more time on the installation, especially in getting your environment prepared to run it successfully, and brought more into the security concerns that I kind of glossed over when we were breezing through.
Good deal, good deal. Yeah, it's got a lot of great content. I think it came out to 70, 80 pages. As a special thank you for you viewers that are joining us today, we're going to be emailing you a link to directly download the ebook, no additional sign up needed. So keep an eye on your email. You'll be getting a link where you can go and grab this ebook. Again, no additional sign up needed for that. So keep an eye out for that. I also want to mention that we have a new forum community that we're building here at Altaro. So we call them our dojo forums, and you can view them by going to dojoforums.altaro.com. And currently today, our Hyper-V Dojo forum is there and working. And really, it's kind of grown outside of just Hyper-V. We are also talking about Azure and cloud stuff. We're talking about container stuff. I think we even have a couple of Office 365 questions that have been asked there as well. So if you want to be part of a new great community, come join us. Eric and I are very active there. And maybe you think of a question about today's webinar that you forgot to ask while you were on the line today. Come ask us there and then we'll get you an answer. Also, if you're interested in some more video content from us, me and Thomas Maurer are going to be doing a Facebook live stream event here in the coming weeks. Thomas is a former Microsoft MVP who actually now works for Microsoft as part of the Azure advocacy team. So Thomas has a lot of great information to share, really a nice insider perspective on all things cloud and Azure. And it's kind of going to be, like I said, a live on the air type of format. If you want to get notified for when that's going to be streaming and available, you can go to altaro.com/hyper-v/signup, or you can just follow the Altaro Facebook page as well at facebook.com/Altaro software to be notified when that is ready to go. And again, take this time to go ahead and get your last couple of questions in here. Eric's kind of going through the list and answering the ones he can. I'm going to talk about Altaro VM Backup here really quick. So that's our core product here that I mentioned a little bit earlier. We focus on 4 things really here at Altaro. The backup has to be super easy to use and efficient to set up. But while being easy to use, it also has to be powerful, flexible, and easy to scale. We also focus a lot on praise-winning support. I have nothing but fantastic things to say about our support team. We don't do tiered support at Altaro. We focus on answering the phone quickly within 30 seconds, and the person that answers the phone is the person that owns your issue start to finish. A couple of our latest developments: we can back up directly to Azure storage accounts. We do offer continuous data protection backups with RTOs as low as 5 minutes. We have WAN optimized replication and DR baked into the product now. That's a recent add. We also have support for Windows Server 2019. If you're an MSP, we do have an MSP program that gets you access to all the bells and whistles of the product. So you don't have to worry about what version of the product you're buying. You get all of it in a pay per VM per month format. No contracts. You can quit at any time. The only requirement is a 10 VM per month minimum. And one thing I want to point out here really quick is Altaro Office 365 backup. We can now protect Office 365 mailboxes, contacts, and calendars with more stuff coming in the future. If you want a little bit more information about that, go to altaro.com/office-365. And more generally, again, on MSPs, altaro.com/MSP for more info. With that, we've got a couple of minutes to address questions here. So again, get your questions into the GoToWebinar questions form here. What I want to do really quick is do 2 quick polls really quick. So the first one is, what do you see yourself using Windows Admin Center for? And so we'll put that poll up here, and we will take a look at the results here in just a second. And while that poll is running, we'll go ahead and tackle a few questions. So, any questions that stand out to you, Eric, that you want to address verbally? Uh-oh, did I lose you, Eric? Must be on mute.
Oh, there I am. I'm here.
Ah, there you are.
No, there's I did see one question straight up your alley, and I keep losing it as I scroll the list.
Was it the one about managing multiple instances of Admin Center as an MSP?
Yes, that one.
Yeah, I did see that one earlier. So that's a question I get quite frequently is, as an MSP, how do you manage and use Windows Admin Center? So real quick, before Altaro, I spent 10 years in the MSP space, so very familiar with kind of the unique struggles that MSPs face. And that's, like I said, that's a question I get quite often. And I have guys that talk about, hey, I could manage this over the public internet, and I really cringe when I hear that, because it just goes against every security molecule in my body to send management traffic over the public internet. I would say if you're an MSP wanting to utilize Windows Admin Center to manage multiple customers, I would target your largest, highest touch customers, and I would establish either a perpetual VPN connection between you and them, or on an as-needed basis when you need to conduct management operations with them. So that's the direction I always like to send MSPs with that question. So I think we've got the poll results here. So it looks like 98% of you are going to use it for server management, with 26 and 29% of you using it for cluster and hyperconverged management, and 23% for Azure hybrid cloud features. Okay, so that's pretty much what I anticipated. So with the manage one server at a time mentality that Windows Admin Center has, that I don't think there's any surprises there, are there, Eric?
Not really, no.
Yeah. So I've got another poll I want to run here that's more specific to Storage Spaces Direct. Basically, whether you're going to use it or not. So go ahead and give you a few minutes to fill up that poll. I'm kind of interested to see where this one ends up. And we'll go ahead and we will touch base on a couple other questions here. Let's see. I do have a recent question here that was just submitted, Eric, about WAC with 2012. So I have a 2012 DCE VM running Exchange 2013 that Microsoft says no on PowerShell 5.0. Thoughts or insights?
This has been a sticking point for me for a long time that yes, that's probably where you are. You're probably stuck, unfortunately. It's upgrading PowerShell on Exchange. Maybe it's changed in the last couple of versions, but I know specifically for 2013, that was a bad plan. You could really back yourself into a corner. So
yeah,
I'm sad to say you're probably stuck on that one.
There was just something about the Exchange PowerShell commandlets that were just ugly too. I mean, most PowerShell commands you run for most things, I mean, it's just a simple one-liner, but I mean, to do something simple in Exchange, it's like 3 lines long, So I don't know if that's just the nature of Exchange or what, but yeah, I wish we had a better answer on that.
And I believe they stated publicly that that is their API, is the PowerShell. I'm like, yeah, okay.
Right. Looks like our second poll is closed here, and the question is, how likely are you to use Storage Spaces Direct? And 55% maybe a little, which, in my conversations, I've started to see that percentage kind of creep up a little bit here over the last couple of months, especially now that we have a UI for managing S2D. So, all right, good insight. Thanks for responding, everyone. I think we got time for just a couple more questions here. And there's one here that we got this morning as well about Firefox. Did you want to address that one, Eric, about the whole browser support thing?
If you want me to, I suppose. But as I mentioned this morning, there's I think every single one of us, one browser or another has just irritated us to the point where we're just kind of like, I'm done with you, and I'm not going to come back for years and years, if ever. And for me, that browser happens to be Firefox. Anyway, the Windows Admin Center team has said that their goal is to make Windows Admin Center HTML5 compliant. If your browser is HTML5 compliant, it's supposed to work. Firefox specifically, I don't know, but it's supposed to work basically. But right. We also know that as we flip between Edge and Chrome, you get a different experience. Like something works better in one than it does the other, and so on. So I can't definitively say yes or no on Firefox, but it's supposed to work.
I suspect that as the new Edge browser starts to make its way out to stable release, I would suspect that a lot of those issues will start to be resolved. That's just my gut feeling. I could be completely wrong, but maybe I'm being optimistic there. Let's see. I think we've got time for one more. Let's take a look here. We addressed the VMM question. One question I think we talked about earlier as well, Eric. Can you manage Linux machines with Windows Admin Center?
So far, the official answer is we love the Linux community, and you guys can get out and develop an extension, and we'll be happy to see it. So coming from Microsoft specifically, at least for now, and as far as the cards I can view ahead, the answer is no, they're not going to do it. So I don't think they're opposed to it per se, just they have so many other things they want to get working, that's not top of mind. So, but the SDK is public. You can go out and encourage somebody, maybe you go search GitHub for Linux and Windows Admin Center. Somebody may already be halfway through it for all I know. So
yeah, could be. That's true. Well, I think that puts us to the top of the hour, and I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. So I'm going to go ahead and take the time to say thank you for attending. Again, if you asked a question that didn't get answered, again, we'll be putting a blog post together that contains a full list of the questions and their answers, so be on the lookout for that. And Eric, I want to thank you for taking the time to come talk to us today about Admin Center. It's been great to have you on the call here.
Always great working with you. Appreciate it. You having me on. And thanks to everybody for coming. Really enjoy this community. Great people.
It is great. It's always great fun, and we're really happy to come share the knowledge with you and hopefully make your life in the trenches a little bit easier as an IT pro. So with that, I'm going to let you go. And again, thanks for attending. Thanks for coming to see us here at Altaro, and we hope to see you for another webinar in the future. Have a good day.